Chapter 459. The weather in the Array sect was gloomy, and the absence of sunlight made people feel uncomfortable. The 8 mountains surrounding the Array martial field were filled with disciples of the Array sect. They were in a terrible mood. In the 3rd round of the competition, Song Qingyu had been severely injured by the Talisman sect. It was very likely that it would affect his foundation in the future. In the 4th round of the competition, Yi Hong had admitted defeat. He didn't even have the courage to fight. In the 5th round, the Talisman sect had generously given the victory to the Array sect. Everyone knew that this victory was the greatest humiliation to the Array sect. Mu Chenghong walked out slowly. His aura was very strong, and he was like a bright star that ignited the hope of all the disciples of the Array sect. His appearance made all the disciples of the Array sect happy. Yes, the Array sect still had Mu Chenghong. The most outstanding disciple of the Array sect, Mu Chenghong. It's Senior Brother Mu. That's great. With Senior Brother Mu here, our Array sect will definitely win this round. Senior Brother Mu, teach the Talisman sect a lesson. All the disciples of the Array sect cheered loudly for their Senior Brother Mu. Mu Chenghong was their hope. Only Mu Chenghong had the ability to defeat the Talisman sect. All the disciples who didn't know the truth were cheering for Mu Chenghong. However, Zhuge Shaoxing, who knew the inside story, was heartbroken. The excited expressions of his disciples were so ironic in his eyes. Had those disciples ever thought about the outcome of this competition? Mu Chenghong was from the Talisman sect. How could the Array sect win? The saddest thing in life was to be betrayed and still count the money for the betrayer. When the people of the Talisman sect saw Mu Chenghong enter the competition, they sneered. They knew that Mu Chenghong had always been on their side. In the past, Mu Chenghong had never lost in the Array Talisman sect because the Talisman sect had deliberately allowed Mu Chenghong to win. This was the only way Mu Chenghong could receive everyone's support in the Array sect. It was also the only way the Array sect's Xiantian Array masters would value Mu Chenghong. The people of the Talisman sect would also be able to obtain more insider information from Mu Chenghong. However, it was different this year. The Array sect was destined to be destroyed. They had already discussed that Mu Chenghong had to lose this year. Moreover, he had to lose to the Talisman sect and completely destroy the Array sect's hope. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. If Mu Chenghong were to lose this year, the members of the Talisman faction would appear to be invincible in the eyes of all the disciples of the Array faction. Mo Ziming, you go up. Mu Chenghong will lose to you. Chang Tiancheng looked at the cheers of the Array faction disciples and couldn't help but sneer. The more you have hope for Mu Chenghong, the more I want to crush your confidence. Yes, sect leader. Mo Ziming responded respectfully. Then, his eyes turned cold. His figure flashed, and he was already standing in front of Mu Chenghong. Mu Chenghong, how have you been? Mo Ziming sneered. Mu Chenghong's ranking on the Supreme Celestial ranking was higher than his, and this had always bothered him. Mo Ziming had always looked down upon Mu Chenghong. Even if Mu Chenghong was a spy of their Talisman sect, he still looked down upon Mu Chenghong. As far as he was concerned, how could a disciple of the Talisman sect that had learned the Tao of formations compare to a disciple of the Talisman sect like him? Mo Ziming, how many times have you lost to me? Mu Chenghong suddenly asked a very strange question. Mo Ziming pursed his lips. He had always looked down on Mu Chenghong, but so far, he had lost to Mu Chenghong 7 times in 10 years according to Chang Tiancheng's request. The two of them had never had a real competition. Mo Ziming had deliberately lost the competition. Although everyone was well aware of this, the proud and arrogant Mo Ziming was very annoyed. No matter how many times I lose to you, you're bound to lose this year, aren't you? Mo Ziming said coldly. You're right. I hope you'll go easy on me. Mu Chenghong sighed. The Talisman competition was like a performance, and he, Mu Chenghong, was the main character of this performance. Mo Zimming revealed a strange smile. I won't go easy on you. Sect leader said that the more you lose, the greater the impact the disciples of the Array faction will receive. You're their hope and faith. If you fall, the disciples of the Array faction will be completely defeated. So, Mu Chenghong, don't blame me for being too harsh. We're just doing things according to the rules. Mo Zimming had lost to Mu Chenghong for so many years. Although he had deliberately lost, he still held a breath in his heart. He had always looked down on these disciples who went out to carry out undercover missions. Today, he wanted to take revenge for all these years. 8 purple talisman papers surrounded Mo Zimming. A terrifying aura gradually filled the entire martial field. It was so domineering and insufferably arrogant. This aura enveloped the hearts of all the disciples of the Array faction. It was quite heavy. Then what Array technique do you want to use this year? Is it still that ridiculous illusion array of yours? Mo Zimming knew Mu Chenghong's background. Mu Chenghong's most powerful array technique was the illusion array. Every year, he would directly use the illusion array to easily defeat Mo Zimming. Mu Chenghong shook his head. Since we're going to perform and the effect of the performance, I'll use Song Qingyu's 7-star Heavenly Thunder. You're also familiar with the flaws of this array technique, aren't you? The 7-star Heavenly Thunder formation art belonged to the Zhongtian formation art. Luo Feilong and Ji Wenkai had already told the people from the Talisman sect about its flaws. That was why Jiang Xiangdi was able to control Song Qingyu's formation art so easily. Good. Very straightforward. I hope you won't blame me for being too heavy-handed in the future. Mo Zimming snickered. The spiritual power of the 8 purple talisman papers around him flowed. His fingertips moved slightly and turned into a mysterious incantation. Purple spiritual power rushed out of the talisman papers and gradually condensed in front of his chest. It formed a purple 8 trigrams, and then his figure merged into the 8 trigrams. I won't. Mu Chenghong's expression was very calm. He waved his hand and 7 innate array bases surrounded him in an orderly manner. As his fingertips continued to weave, each of the innate formation bases flickered with a blue light. Then, huge thunderballs rushed out from each of the innate formation bases and stood in the Big Dipper above Mu Chenghong. The blue electric arcs kept flashing. The brilliant heavenly power completely suppressed Mo Zimming's aura. Why did Mu Chenghong use the Central Heaven Array technique, like the 7-star Heavenly Thunder? Why didn't he use the illusion array that he's good at? Array Master Qishui asked in surprise. Mu Chenghong's illusion array was even better than innate array masters like them. It was not an undeserved reputation that he was called the #1 genius. The people of the Talisman Grandmaster could not teach Mu Chenghong anything about array formation. Mu Chenghong had truly learned the essence of array formation by himself. He had used array formation to a superb level. Zhuge Shaoxing remained silent. In his opinion, what difference did it make which array formation Mu Chenghong used? The result of this competition was already predetermined. Mu Chenghong would definitely lose to Mo Zimming. This would only deepen the fear of the disciples of the Array faction toward the Talisman Grandmaster. Mu Chenghong pointed his finger gently. The first thunderball had already swiftly struck in the direction where Mo Zimming had disappeared. Boundless pressure enveloped Mo Zimming, forcing Mo Zimming's figure out. Mo Zimming snorted. The talisman shadows in his hand intertwined. A huge purple spirit palm stretched out from behind him and caught the first thunderball that was striking down. I'll return it to you. Mo Zimming's lips curled into a vicious smile. He swung the purple spirit palm forcefully and threw the thunderball in his hand directly at Mu Chenghong. Mu Chenghong's second heavenly thunder struck down once again. However, the first and second heavenly thunderballs suddenly disappeared halfway. At the same time, the array martial field flashed with a dazzling white light. This white light was so dazzling that everyone couldn't help but close their eyes. When they opened their eyes again, Mu Chenghong and Mo Ziming had already disappeared from the martial arts field. Both of their figures were extremely fast. They quickly intersected in the air above the martial arts field, disappeared, and intersected again. The light between the array formation and talisman techniques surged. Only 5 of the 7 thunderballs in the sky were left. However, they did not strike down again. For a moment it seemed that no one had seized control of the thunderballs. Chang Tianqing vaguely sensed that something was wrong. He frowned and asked, "Junior brother Zhou, have you told Mu Chenghong? Why was it that he and Mo Ziming were locked in battle? He even looks like he's winning?" Zhou Jinglin lowered his head and said respectfully, "Sect Master, don't worry. Mu Chenghong does not dare to resist. I've already told him that he must fail this time." "That's good." Chang Tianqing was slightly relieved. Then, he revealed a mocking smile. This was because all the disciples of the Array faction were cheering at this moment. Senior Brother Mu is actually able to use the Zhongtian Array technique to such a high level. He's even on par with Mo Ziming. He's really amazing. Did you notice? Senior Brother Mu obviously has the upper hand. Mo Ziming is going to be defeated. That's great. Senior Brother Mu has killed that bastard from the Talisman faction. All the disciples of the Array faction were extremely excited. Mu Chenghong had finally defeated Mo Ziming. It was time for them to hold their heads high. However, at this moment, a sudden change occurred. A figure fell heavily from the sky and smashed onto the ground. It was like a broken sandbag, resounding in everyone's hearts. All the disciples of the Array faction were stunned. This was because the person who fell was actually Mu Chenghong, who obviously had the upper hand. Why was Senior Brother Mu defeated by Mo Ziming? How is this possible? Senior Brother Mu clearly had the upper hand just now. The disciples of the Array faction were shocked. They never expected Mo Ziming from the Talisman faction to defeat Mu Chenghong. All the Khanate Array masters who did not know the truth stood up abruptly. They looked anxiously at Mu Chenghong, who was struggling to get up from the ground. "Sect leader, Mu Chenghong is in danger," Array Master Qi Shui said anxiously. Zhuge Xiaoxing's expression was cold. He snorted heavily and said, "This is the rule. We can't interfere." He could not wait for Mo Ziming to kill Mu Chenghong. However, he knew that this was just a ruse put on by the Talisman faction. Mu Chenghong would not suffer any substantial injuries. Everything was just a show directed by them. "I'm returning the heavenly lightning to you." Mo Ziming waved his hand and the third heavenly lightning struck, sending Mu Chenghong flying. Mu Chenghong fell on the edge of the Array martial field again. However, just like how Jiang Xiangdi dealt with Song Qingyu, Mo Ziming kicked Mu Chenghong back into the Array martial field. 4 more heavenly lightning. Mo Ziming's expression became very calm. The domineering heavenly lightning struck again. "Senior Brother Mu, dodge!" "No!" All the disciples of the Array faction shouted in despair. The left side of Mu Chenghong's body was charred black. His eyes were filled with fear. At the same time, he clutched his throat as if he wanted to say something but could not. Bang! Under the horrified gazes of all the disciples of the Array faction, Mu Chenghong was sent flying again by the heavenly lightning. This time, the heavenly lightning struck Mu Chenghong's right arm and blew his right arm into a bloody mess. His severed arm fell on the Array martial field, and his charred palm was still trembling slightly. "What?" Zhuge Xiaoxing frowned. Mo Ziming had blown Mu Chenghong's arm away? This meant that Mu Chenghong would become a cripple. Did he pay such a huge price to put on a ruse? Was Mu Chenghong so worthless in the eyes of the Talisman faction? He did not feel any heartache for Mu Chenghong, but he was still faintly worried. If the members of the Talisman faction really intend to give up on Mu Chenghong, who would hold the line for Feng Mu without Mu Chenghong? How would Feng Mu activate the Array Hall to protect the Array faction? Chapter 460. The fifth heavenly thunder struck again. This time, it struck Mu Qinghong's right leg. As expected, Mu Qinghong's right leg was blown away. In just a short moment, Mu Qinghong had become a cripple. No. Senior Brother Mu. Sect leader, please save Senior Brother Mu. Many Array faction disciples felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. They were all horrified when they saw Mu Qinghong being beaten into a cripple by Mo Ziming. Mu Qinghong was the most powerful disciple in their hearts, and was also their role model. However, they had never expected that he would be so weak in front of the Symbol Grandmaster and even be severely injured. Enough, stop it. Zhuge Shaoxing was furious and no longer cared about the rules. It was their business what the Symbol Grandmaster wanted to do. However, Mu Qinghong was an indispensable part of Feng Mu's activation of the Array Palace. Zhuge Shaoxing would never allow Mu Qinghong to be severely injured. Lord Zhuge, why have you tried to stop the competition time and time again? What is your intention? Chang Tianqing stood in front of Zhuge Shaoxing. When he saw Mu Qinghong's miserable state, he did not show any pity at all. Just as Mo Ziming had said, even though Mu Qinghong was one of them, he had learned array techniques which were poles apart from their symbol technique. Even if Mu Qinghong wanted to return to the Symbol Grandmaster, he would not be accepted by the Symbol Grandmaster. Even though Chang Tianqing had not expected Mo Ziming to beat Mu Qinghong so badly, he did not want to stop the competition. This was because from another perspective, the more serious Mu Qinghong's injuries were, the greater the impact on the Symbol Grandmaster's disciples' mentality. As long as he could completely destroy the Symbol Grandmaster's mentality, they would become extremely fearful of the Symbol Grandmaster. In that case, sacrificing Mu Qinghong was completely acceptable. You've gone too far by beating him so heavily. Zhuge Shaoxing was unable to restrain his anger. However, Chang Tianqing smiled and said, Sect Leader Zhuge, what are you talking about? Life and death in the Symbol Grandmaster's Array Technique competition is up to fate. It's not good to say anything when one's skills are inferior, is it? You. Zhuge Shaoxing was furious. He anxiously looked at the half-dead Mu Qinghong on the ground, and couldn't bear it. He had watched Mu Qinghong grow up. Although he had just found out that Mu Qinghong was a spy, Mu Qinghong had been the only Xiantian disciple of the Array faction for many years. He was the darling of almost all the Xiantian Array masters. Zhuge Shaoxing felt an inexplicable heartache when he saw Mu Qinghong lying on the ground, desperately struggling, clutching his throat, trying to say something but unable to. Whether it was Situ Yangtian, Master Lu, or the other Khanate Array masters, all of them were filled with rage. They wanted to shed all pretense of cordiality with the Talisman sect. At worst, there would be a fierce battle. What was there to be afraid of? However, since Zhuge Shaoxing didn't make a move, they couldn't make a move either. Everyone from the Array faction was anxiously looking at Mu Qinghong, who was lying on the ground. They wanted to save him, but Mu Yu was the only one who kept looking at Mo Ziming. Mu Yu's eyes widened in shock as he watched everything in disbelief. No one noticed anything unusual. He was the only one who could clearly see the situation on the Array martial field. He was extremely shocked, and a strange smile suddenly appeared on his face. At this moment, Mo Ziming seemed to have sensed something and looked into Mu Yu's eyes. Mo Ziming's eyes were so clear that there wasn't a trace of viciousness in them. They were like a clear spring without any impurities. Mo Ziming smiled and continued to control the hand seals. Then, the sixth heavenly thunder struck Mu Qinghong again. Everyone closed their eyes. They couldn't bear to watch this scene anymore. Their hearts sank to the bottom of the valley, and they were in complete despair. On the other hand, everyone from the Talisman faction smiled as they watched Mo Ziming kill Mu Qinghong. No one treated Mu Qinghong as one of their own. They only treated him as a tool to be used. But at this moment, a weak and angry voice suddenly shouted out from Mu Qinghong's mouth. Mu Chenghong had been holding his throat and couldn't speak. After the sixth heavenly thunder struck him, he seemed to have regained the ability to speak. Although this sentence was very weak, it clearly spread to everyone's ears. Mu Chenghong, you dare to kill me! This sentence sounded so strange coming from Mu Chenghong's mouth. Everyone's first reaction was to wonder if Mu Chenghong had been struck by the heavenly thunder and had lost his mind. How could he shout out his name? Only Mu Yu revealed a look of surprise. He didn't even look at Mu Chenghong on the ground. Instead, he stared at Mo Ziming, who was controlling the 7 stars' heavenly thunder in the air. All the Xiantian array masters and talisman masters present didn't see any clues. Only Mu Yu saw the true face of this competition. Mu Chenghong, I'll fight it out with you. On the ground, Mu Chenghong suddenly spat out a mouthful of shocking blood. Then, the blood gradually gathered in front of his eyes to form a blood talisman. This blood talisman suddenly exploded and turned into a bloody mist that filled the sky. The entire formation martial field trembled. Then, the entire formation martial field cracked like porcelain. Then, countless formation pattern fragments scattered, revealing the true face of the formation martial field. The one lying on the ground was not the miserable Mu Chenghong. It was clearly Mo Ziming, who was missing an arm and a leg. And the one floating in the air controlling the 7 stars' heavenly thunder was not Mo Ziming, but the unharmed Mu Chenghong, who was in high spirits. Everyone was stunned by the dramatic change in the formation martial field. Even the people from Talisman Grandmaster widened their eyes in disbelief. Everyone's eyes switched between Mo Ziming and Mu Chenghong. They couldn't understand what they were seeing. Just now, they saw Mu Chenghong lying on the ground and Mo Ziming mercilessly killing him. But now, the two of them had switched roles? What was going on? Mu Chenghong, how dare you use an illusory array to kill me? I will definitely tear you into pieces. Mo Ziming roared in grief and indignation. Illusory array. These 2 words exploded in everyone's ears. Then, many people reacted one after another. Mu Chenghong was best at illusory arrays. He had actually used his own illusory array to deceive everyone present. Regardless of whether it was Array Grandmaster or Talisman Grandmaster, none of them had noticed the flaw of this illusory array. The only person who could see that this was an illusory array was Mu Yu. Mu Chenghong had used the 7 stars' heavenly thunder from the beginning. Mo Ziming thought that Mu Chenghong was really going to admit defeat. Therefore, he used the weakness of the 7 stars' heavenly thunder to take over Mu Chenghong's formation skills and use the 7 stars' heavenly thunder on Mu Chenghong. However, Mu Chenghong had no intention of admitting defeat. Instead, he controlled the first heavenly thunder and the second heavenly thunder to collide with each other. He created a temporary visual blind zone, causing everyone to be unable to see the situation clearly for a breath of time. However, in this breath of time, Mu Chenghong had already activated his incomparably powerful illusory array, enveloping the entire formation martial field. He used the illusory array on the formation martial field. What everyone saw in the formation martial field was an illusion created by Mu Chenghong. Mu Chenghong's powerful illusory array made everyone think that he was Mo Ziming and Mo Ziming was him. Mu Chenghong's strength was much higher than Mo Ziming's. In addition, Mo Ziming was too arrogant. In an instant, Mu Chenghong ruthlessly defeated Mo Ziming. Everyone thought that they saw Mu Chenghong being defeated by Mo Ziming and being heavily thrown onto the formation martial field. However, in reality, it was Mo Ziming who was defeated by Mu Chenghong and was thrown onto the formation martial field by Mu Chenghong. The 7 stars' heavenly thunder did not strike Mu Chenghong's body. Instead, it struck Mo Ziming's body. This was Mu Chenghong's illusory array, stealing the sky. Exchanging the sun. Mu Chenghong used his powerful array technique to confuse everyone's appearance and mistaken their identities. He did this to give Mo Ziming a taste of his own medicine. He used the 7 stars Heavenly Thunder's powerful destructive power on Mo Ziming. Mu Chenghong was a member of the Talisman sect. However, he was sent to the Array sect as a spy since he was young. Mu Chenghong was different from Luo Feilong, Ji Wenkai and the rest. He was a sentimental person. He liked everything about the Array sect. This was the place where he grew up. Even if his identity did not belong to this place, he had long treated the Array sect as his home. Between his identity and his home, he made his choice. Mu Chenghong was the only Xiantian disciple in the Array sect for so many years. He received the best nurturing. The Array sect opened everything to him. He relied on the Array sect to have such a powerful cultivation. However, the Talisman sect wanted him to destroy the Array sect. For the past few days, Mu Chenghong had been suffering. He did not know how to choose. However, just a moment ago, he suddenly understood his own identity. Regardless of whether it was Song Qingyu or Yi Hong, their situation had deeply pierced Mu Chenghong's heart. In order to avenge the Array sect, Song Qingyu knew that he was no match for them. However, he had still chosen to fight. In the end, he had ended up with serious injuries. Yi Hong had been beaten up by the Talisman sect. He had chosen to admit defeat before the fight had even started. There was no one else from the Array sect who could fight. If he did not step forward to win this competition, everyone from the Array sect would fall into deep despair. He wanted to help the Array sect overcome this crisis. The only way was to let the disciples of the Array sect see hope again. He wanted them to understand that the Talisman sect was not invincible. This was the only way that all the disciples would dare to step forward to defend the Array sect when the Talisman sect and Stargate attacked the Array sect. They would not run away like Yi Hong. Mu Chenghong wanted to set an example for all the disciples of the Array sect. However, at the same time, he also knew that if he taught Mo Ziming a lesson openly, he would definitely be obstructed by the members of the Talisman sect. Therefore, he utilized his formidable talent in the art of formations to execute an extremely superb illusory formation to deceive everyone. The Array Talisman competition was a game for the Talisman sect. Since the other party wanted to play, Mu Chenghong would play along with the other party's rules. The moment he made his choice, he had decided to live and die with the Array sect. Whether it was Zhuge Shaoxing, Master Lu, Situ Yangtian, or the other 16 Khanate Array masters, Mu Chenghong was indebted to them. He wanted to repay their kindness. That was all. Mu Yu quietly looked at Mu Chenghong, who was in the air. Mu Chenghong's illusion array was indeed very powerful. It had deceived countless people, including Zhuge Shaoxing and the other 19 Khanate Array masters. However, it had not deceived him. When they first met, Mu Chenghong had shown Mu Yu his powerful illusion array. However, Mu Yu had broken through Mu Chenghong's illusion array. Today, Mu Chenghong's illusion array could be said to be flawless. The only flaw was Mu Chenghong's clear eyes. Mu Chenghong had used the illusion array to disguise himself as Mo Ziming. However, he was unable to disguise Mo Ziming's rebellious eyes. Mo Ziming would not have such pure eyes. Everyone's attention was on Mo Ziming, who was disguised as Mu Chenghong by the illusion array. Only Mu Yu saw Mo Ziming's eyes. However, he did not say anything. This was because when Mu Chenghong had struck Mo Ziming with the 7 stars Heavenly Thunder, he had already understood that Mu Chenghong had betrayed the Talisman sect and wanted to help protect the Array sect. This sentimental young man had feelings for the Array sect. From that moment on, he was no longer a spy for the Talisman sect. He was a member of the Array sect. Chapter 461. The dramatic turn of events stunned everyone. Soon after, many people realized that this was caused by Mu Chenghong's powerful array skills. All the disciples of the Array faction burst into enthusiastic cheers. The role model in their hearts had used a formidable formation technique to toy with the members of the Talisman sect, and he'd even helped Song Qingyu vent his resentment. He'd returned all the vicious attacks the Talisman sect had inflicted on Song Qingyu to Mo Ziming. This was undoubtedly an exciting event. Looking at Mo Ziming's mutilated body, all the disciples of the Array faction felt as if they had vented their anger. Their morale instantly soared as they roared, "Kill him!" The faces of the members of the Talisman faction were extremely distorted. They never expected Mu Chenghong to change sides at the last minute and beat Mo Ziming into such a state. What was even more infuriating was that Mu Chenghong's illusory array had completely fooled them. They did not even have the chance to rescue Mo Ziming. If Mo Ziming had not used a self-mutilating blood talisman to break Mu Chenghong's illusory array, they would probably still be foolishly waiting to see the Array faction make a fool of themselves. The blood talisman was an extremely strange talisman technique of the Talisman faction. At the cost of one's cultivation, it could break all spells cast on one's body. However, in exchange, one's cultivation would drop by several levels and would never be able to take another step forward. The blood talisman was very powerful, but it would also destroy one's future. Mo Ziming did not want to die. Not only was he affected by Mu Chenghong's illusory array, but his ability to speak was also restricted by Mu Chenghong's array skills. He had no choice but to use the blood talisman. Mu Chenghong's gaze turned cold. He formed another seal with his hand, and the seventh lightning bolt in the sky began to flicker. The power of the 7 stars sky thunder in his hands was more than 10 times stronger than when Song Qingyu had used it. Especially the 7th lightning bolt. If it were to strike, it would blast Mo Ziming to pieces. Mu Chenghong did not think that he was cruel. The Talisman faction wanted to kill everyone in the Array faction. Since he had chosen to stand on the Array faction's side, there was no room for mercy. Today, the Talisman faction would join forces with Stargate to carry out a massacre on the Array faction. He had to strike first to gain the upper hand. Mu Chenghong, don't you dare kill Mo Ziming! Chang Tiancheng angrily rebuked and was about to charge towards Mu Chenghong. However, this time, it was Zhuge Shaosheng who stopped in front of Chang Tiancheng. He sneered and said, "Sect Master Chang, life and death in a talisman competition is up to fate. If you're not as skilled as others, you can't say anything, right?" When Zhuge Shaosheng said this, he was in a very good mood. When everyone thought that it was Mu Chenghong who had fallen to the ground, Chang Tiancheng wanted to save Mu Chenghong. That was what Chang Tiancheng said, but the ending was so dramatic. Who would have thought that Mu Chenghong was the leader of this competition? Zhuge Shaosheng was happy to see that Mu Chenghong wanted to kill Mo Ziming. If Chang Tiancheng wanted to interfere, then Zhuge Shaosheng would not let Chang Tiancheng succeed so easily. Nonsense, Mo Ziming's talisman technique has already disappeared. Chang Tiancheng looked at the martial arts field, but he was stunned again because Mo Ziming's talisman technique, Purple Spirit Palm, had been floating on Mo Ziming's body. If Purple Spirit Palm was still there, Mo Ziming could not be considered to have removed his talisman technique, nor could he be considered to have admitted defeat. Mo Ziming looked at the gradually descending heavenly lightning with an ashen face. The Purple Spirit Palm was not used by him at all. Instead, it was controlled by Mu Chenghong's powerful array technique, and forced him to use it. Only now did everyone understand how powerful Mu Chenghong's array skills were. Even many innate array masters of the Array faction admitted that they were inferior to him in terms of illusory array. He had hidden his skills for so many years and the Talisman sect only knew a little about him. However, it was often this kind of person who, once he chose his side, would definitely deal a huge blow to the other side. "Stop him!" Chang Tiancheng turned his face and shouted at Zhou Jinglin. Zhou Jinglin promised and then intertwined his fingers. Red talisman shadows streaked across his hand. At the same time, Mu Chenghong's face suddenly flushed red in the air. His whole body twisted in pain and he lost his balance and fell from the sky. Pft! Mu Chenghong spat out a mouthful of blood. Streaks of strange red light appeared on his exposed skin. They seemed to be crawling all over his body like earthworms, causing him unbearable pain. The evil talisman technique of the talisman sect, the god-vanquishing talisman. Just like how he controlled Luo Feilong and Ji Wenkai, Mu Chenghong's body was also affected by the god-vanquishing talisman. As long as Zhou Jinglin willed it, he could completely kill Mu Chenghong in a few breaths. This was the method Zhou Jinglin used to control spies. All the disciples of the Array faction were shocked again. They did not understand why Mu Chenghong, who was originally sure of victory, suddenly became like this. However, Mu Chenghong still maintained a clear gaze despite the pain. He did not stop the spell in his hand, and the seventh brilliant heavenly lightning bolt still struck Mo Ziming. Boom! Mo Ziming was blasted into a pile of ashes by the powerful lightning ball. There was one less Supreme Immortal on the Supreme Immortal ranking board. The Array faction wins. Mu Chenghong said this sentence with a pale face. Then, he could no longer withstand the devastation of the god-vanquishing talisman and collapsed. Zhuge Shaoxing had already rushed over to pick Mu Chenghong up. At the same time, he directly made a move. A powerful spirit energy array pattern flowed from his fingertips and quickly touched Mu Chenghong's body. Then, the chaotic red light on Mu Chenghong's body gradually dissipated. Sect leader, I'm sorry. I didn't do anything wrong to the Array faction. I like everything about the Array faction. I want to be a disciple of the Array faction. Mu Chenghong forced his eyes open and looked at Zhuge Shaoxing in front of him. His gaze was still so clear, like a clear spring without any impurities. As a spy, he had been living in guilt for so many years. The power of the god-vanquishing talisman made him not dare to disobey Zhou Jinglin's orders. He had always wanted to be himself and be a good disciple of the Array faction. However, he had no choice. He had always done things against his heart and did not dare to tell the truth. He had never been a heinous person. He had a conscience in his heart and did not want to see the Array faction being humiliated and ruined. You have always been a disciple of the Array faction. Zhuge Shaoxing held Mu Chenghong's hand tightly. His heart was filled with complex feelings towards Mu Chenghong. He had always thought highly of Mu Chenghong. When he found out that Mu Chenghong was a spy of the Talisman sect, his heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. He wanted to kill Mu Chenghong with his own hands. However, he did not expect that Mu Chenghong was not what they had imagined him to be. Mu Chenghong knew that after he killed Mo Ziming, the Talisman sect would kill him as well. He was prepared to die. He only hoped that he could do his part to take away one of the Talisman sect's people and fight for a glimmer of hope for the Array faction. Mu Yu looked at Mu Chenghong. His elixir pills were unable to heal the injuries caused by the god-vanquishing talisman. At this moment, there was nothing he could do to help. Junior brother, did you go to the third Array tablet? Mu Chenghong turned to look at Mu Yu. Mu Yu hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. You should have gone because the real. Mu Chenghong's voice weakened and he lost consciousness. Can he survive? Mu Yu sighed. Zhuge Shaoxing shook his head. I can only temporarily suppress the power of the god-vanquishing talisman. I can't suppress it forever. Once the array I left in his body loses its effect, the talisman sect's people will trigger the god-vanquishing talisman to kill him. Mu Yu clenched his fist. Mu Yu recalled the words that Mu Chenghong once said to him. There are many times when we can't predict what will happen. However, I would rather leave the most complete side of the Array faction in my memories. Back then, Mu Yu knew that Mu Chenghong was a spy. He thought that Mu Chenghong had said those words to express his determination to destroy the Array faction. Now, he realized that he had misunderstood Mu Chenghong's intentions. Leaving the most complete side of the Array faction in his memories was not to destroy the Array faction. Instead, it was Mu Chenghong's farewell to the Array faction. Since Mu Chenghong chose the Array faction, it meant that the Talisman sect's people would definitely kill him. At the moment of his death, the most complete side of the Array faction was indeed left in his memories. You want to leave the most complete side of the Array faction in your memories. However, I also want to leave the Array faction in the real world. You should help me. Mu Yu's eyes flickered with intertwining black and white lights. Mu Chenghong was a righteous person. He shouldn't die in the hands of the Talisman sect. Why aren't you killing Mu Chenghong? Chang Tiancheng shouted at Zhou Jinglin. Zhou Jinglin once again triggered the god-vanquishing talisman. However, he felt an invisible resistance. He smiled bitterly. Sect head, we have underestimated Mu Chenghong. He is very smart. He seemed to have found a way to use a powerful array technique to suppress the god-vanquishing talisman in his body. Although this array technique can only block it for a short while, it is enough to prevent me from killing him instantly. Moreover, Zhuge Shaoxing helped to suppress the talisman. We won't be able to kill him in a short period of time. Chang Tiancheng's face was ashen. He was furious that Mo Ziming died in the hands of Mu Chenghong. Mo Ziming was one of the 3 extreme immortals of the Array faction. He actually died in the hands of Mu Chenghong. This was a huge blow to the Array faction. Sect head, should we order the people outside to come in and take revenge for junior brother Mo? Jiang Xiangdi asked sorrowfully. The 3 of them were usually as close as brothers. Today, they came here to participate in the talisman competition to humiliate the Array faction before it was destroyed. Who would have thought that such an unforeseen event would happen? Chang Tiancheng clenched his fists. As long as he gave the order, the people outside would come in according to the plan and raze the Array faction to the ground. However, he was still unwilling to give up. The talisman competition was originally his game. However, the Array faction took the initiative. They had gone too far. Now, in this game, the Array formation faction had won 4 rounds, while they had only won 2. This was a great humiliation. Anyway, the Array faction's destruction is a foregone conclusion. Let's play this game to the end. There is still one Xiantian disciple who hasn't made a move yet. Lingjing, no matter what, you have to kill that person called Feng Mu. I want to see what ability this Feng Mu has to be chosen by the Array Heavenly Tao to control the Array Hall. I need you to test him. If he doesn't dare to accept the challenge, we will directly attack the Array faction. Chang Tiancheng snorted. In the remaining 3 rounds, the Talisman faction would definitely win 2 of them. The last round would be the Talisman faction's strongest Xiantian disciple, Lingjing. Not only did he want to win this year's talisman competition, he also wanted to see what kind of strength this Feng Mu had. Chapter 462. What's wrong with senior brother Mu? Is he alright? I don't know, he seems to be seriously injured. The talisman sect must have used some treacherous methods. How shameless! It's alright, we've already won 4 rounds in this year's talisman competition. As long as we win 1 more round, the Array faction will win this year's talisman competition. All the disciples of the Array faction were delighted. In the past, it would be considered good if the Array faction could win 3 rounds in the talisman competition. However, the Array faction had won 4 rounds in this year's talisman competition, and there were 3 more rounds left. Victory seemed to be beckoning to all the disciples of the Array faction. Mu Chenghong's victory over Mo Ziming from the Talisman sect had given all the disciples of the Array faction confidence. So what if the Talisman sect was powerful? They had still been taught a lesson by Mu Chenghong. They had placed their hopes on the Houtian disciple Zhang Qing and the culmination disciple Ji Wenkai because both of them were extremely outstanding talents. As long as they won 1 round, they would have a 90% chance of winning this year's talisman competition. As for the Jindan period Xiantian disciple Feng Mu, Everyone thought that he was only here to gain experience. They did not expect him to win at all. Chang Tianqing's face turned gloomy when he heard the discussions of the disciples of the Array faction. He sneered and said, "You want to win? The remaining 2 rounds belong to my people. What right do you have to win? Let Hu Jiu and Ma Qingye kill Zhang Kai and Ji Wenkai." Zhou Jinglin remained silent. He was not affected by Chang Tianqing's decision at all. To him, the death of 2 people would not affect his plan to overturn the Array faction. In fact, the benefits outweighed the disadvantages. Zhang Kai and Ji Wenkai were members of the Talisman sect, but the disciples of the Array faction did not know that. The disciples of the Array faction had placed all their hopes on these 2 people. If they were killed in front of all the disciples of the Array faction, the disciples of the Array faction would fall into despair once again. Besides, how could the Talisman sect acknowledge their existence when they had learned the Array technique? Chang Tianqing's eyes were extremely cold and vicious like a resentful snake. It was no big deal to kill Zhang Qing and Ji Wenkai in order to strike a blow to the disciples of the Array faction's confidence. He could treat it as them dying for the sake of the Talisman sect. Then the 2 of you can make your final contribution to our Talisman Grandmaster. Zhou Jinglin didn't feel any pity for Ji Wenkai and Zhang Kai. When he was in the Yin Corp's array, he could make his Array Guardian apprentice self-destruct to buy time for himself. He even dared to kill Mu Chenghong. Was there anything he couldn't do? These disciples who had been sent to the Array sect as spies would never be accepted by the Talisman sect again. Even if the Talisman sect destroyed the Array sect today, the fate they would face was no better than death. Hu Jiu was a disciple at the 9th stage of the Golden Core realm. He represented the acquired realm disciples. He leaped onto the Array martial field, his eyes filled with killing intent. He had already received orders from the sect leader to prepare to kill his own fellow sect members. The members of the Talisman faction always had an indescribable sense of superiority over the Array faction. They looked down on the Array Dao and naturally looked down on their fellow disciples who had learned the Array Dao. Therefore, killing Zhang Kai was a simple matter. Zhang Kai also walked up. His expression was very calm, because he knew that he had to lose this competition, so he acted very calm, completely unaware that a fatal disaster had already descended upon him. "Senior brother, please show mercy. I will be knocked out of the field at an appropriate time," Zhang Kai said softly. Hu Jiu chuckled. "Junior brother, I know you will." As he spoke, Zhang Kai had already summoned his post-celestial array foundation, used his most powerful post-celestial array technique, and charged towards Hu Jiu. His post-celestial array technique appeared to be incomparably powerful, but only he knew that it was just a bluff. After all, this was just a performance to him. Since it was a performance, he naturally had to have some acting skills. Hu Jiu also charged forward. Post-celestial array technique and talisman technique intertwined in the air, colliding with each other. It was difficult to tell who would win. At this moment, Zhang Kai felt that his performance was about done. He showed a flaw and said, "Senior brother, now is the time." "All right." Hu Jiu's cold gaze swept across Zhang Kai's face. Zhang Kai was slightly stunned. In an instant, he seemed to have sensed Hu Jiu's killing intent. However, he recalled that Hu Jiu was one of them, so how could he kill him? It must be an illusion. Hu Jiu's talisman technique was added to his hand. His palm was like a knife, and it ruthlessly slashed across Zhang Kai's throat. Zhang Kai's eyes widened. He wanted to ask why his senior brother had failed. However, fresh blood flowed out from his mouth. His terrified eyes seemed to be questioning Hu Jiu. He had clearly agreed with Hu Jiu to show a flaw and admit defeat. Why did Hu Jiu want to kill him? He could never understand. As spies from the Talisman Grandmaster, it was impossible for them to turn back from the day they entered the Array sect to learn the Array Dao. Their deaths were insignificant in the eyes of the people from the Talisman Grandmaster. Bang! Zhang Kai's corpse fell heavily on the ground, shocking everyone. How ruthless! He even killed his own people. Zhuge Shaoxing already knew that Zhang Kai was a spy from the Talisman Grandmaster. Zhang Kai's death didn't mean much to him. However, even so, he still couldn't bear it. He didn't expect the people from the Talisman Grandmaster to be so vicious and merciless to such a perverse extent. All the Array sect disciples were in an uproar. This year's Array Talisman competition was no longer the same as the previous years. Ever since Mu Chenghong killed Mo Ziming, it had turned into a life and death competition. All the Array sect disciples were unknowingly speaking out for Zhang Kai. When Mu Chenghong killed Mo Ziming, they felt relieved because Jiang Xiangdi had severely injured Song Qingyu. However, when it was their turn to be killed, they couldn't sit still. Damn it! They killed one of our people. How can we tolerate this? We still have senior brother Ji Wenkai. With senior brother Ji's strength, he will definitely win. We will definitely win this year's Array Talisman competition. All the Array sect disciples roared furiously. Then, they once again placed their hopes on Ji Wenkai. Ji Wenkai was an outstanding figure among the culmination disciples. To the Array sect disciples, he was the person who had the highest chance of defeating the Talisman Grandmaster. These Array sect disciples all thought that Zhang Kai was one of them. However, only Ji Wenkai, Luo Failong and a few others knew the truth. Ji Wenkai stared in horror at Zhang Kai, who had died in Hu Jio's hands. At first, he didn't understand what had happened. However, when his questioning gaze landed on Zhou Jinglin, Zhou Jinglin's cold gaze made him feel as if he had fallen into an abyss. He suddenly realized that the Talisman Grandmaster was planning to use their deaths to attack the confidence of the Array sect disciples. If he guessed correctly, the next one to die would be him. Junior brother Qingzhua, you should go up for this competition. Senior brother is feeling a little unwell. Ji Wenkai had already decided to retreat. He didn't want to die. Qingzhua had won the previous round without a fight. In order to mock the Array sect, the Talisman Grandmaster had purposely allowed the Array sect to win. Therefore, Qingzhua didn't go up for the competition. Qingzhua was also enraged by Zhang Kai's death. When he heard that Ji Wenkai wanted him to go up for the competition, he didn't hesitate to go up and fight to the death with the Talisman Grandmaster. However, Mu Yu stopped him in time. Senior brother Ji, Qingzhua's cultivation can't compare to yours. This competition belongs to none other than you, Mu Yu said coldly. He couldn't let Qingzhua throw his life away. Ji Wenkai had already informed the Talisman Grandmaster of Qingzhua's formation skills. He would be killed in less than 15 minutes if he went up for the competition. Cold sweat broke out on Ji Wenkai's forehead. He hurriedly squeezed out a smile and said, Junior brother Fengmu, it's not that I don't want to go up, but I really can't. Why don't I forfeit this round? What? The Array sect has nurtured you for so many years. Now that it's finally your turn to serve the Array sect, you're running away? Zhuge Shaoxing scoffed. He knew that Ji Wenkai would definitely die if he went up for the competition. However, he would rather let the Talisman Grandmaster kill each other than send Qingzhua to his death. Since Zhuge Shaoxing had spoken, how could Ji Wenkai dare to refuse? He was now in a difficult situation and had no way out. Ji Wenkai's face was as white as a sheet of paper. He had no choice but to brace himself and walk into the arena. Ma Qingye was also staring at him coldly. Ji Wenkai's throat felt dry. Zhang Kai's death had caused him to feel extreme despair. He still could not understand why the Talisman Grandmaster would still want to kill him after he had worked so hard as a spy for them for so many years. Senior brother, I trust you've been well since we last met. Ma Qingye's smile was filled with endless ridicule. Ji Wenkai clenched his fist. Zhou Jinglin sent you to kill me, right? Ma Qingye raised his brows. He then smiled and said, "Senior brother, you must be joking. We're all on the same side. Hu Jiu had killed Zhang Kai because Zhang Kai wanted to betray the Talisman Grandmaster, just like Mu Chenghong. Therefore, we had no choice but to act." "I don't believe it. How could Zhang Kai possibly betray the Talisman Grandmaster?" Ji Wenkai's entire body was trembling. As a spy for so many years, he had to live in fear every day. He had originally thought that he would be able to openly regain his status as a disciple of the Talisman Grandmaster after today. Who would have thought that he would end up in such a state? Zhang Kai has indeed betrayed the Talisman Grandmaster. Therefore, we must execute him on the spot. As long as senior brother wholeheartedly follows the original plan, I won't have the heart to kill you. Ma Chengye smiled. However, the murderous intent in his eyes was completely exposed. "What if I don't want to lose to you?" Ji Wenkai mustered up his courage. He wanted to rebel against the Talisman Grandmaster, just like Mu Chenghong, and see if he could obtain Zhuge Xiaosheng's praise. Perhaps, he might even be able to return to the Array sect. However, he had forgotten one thing. He did not have Mu Chenghong's ability, nor did he have Mu Chenghong's courage. "Senior brother, you should have seen Mu Chenghong's fate after being punished by the God Annihilation Talisman, right? Even though Mu Chenghong is hanging on by a thread, he will not be able to escape death. Do you think that Zhuge Xiaosheng will help you suppress the power of the God Annihilation Talisman?" Ma Chengye asked slowly. Ji Wenkai had completely collapsed. He was different from Mu Chenghong. They were both spies. Mu Chenghong had chosen to disregard his own life for the sake of the Array sect. He had killed Mo Ziming from the Talisman Grandmaster with the intention of perishing together. On the other hand, he had chosen to fight against Ma Chengye for the sake of dragging out an ignoble existence. Once the God Annihilation Talisman appeared on his body, it would mean that his identity as a spy had been exposed. He had never contributed to the Array sect, so why would Zhuge Xiaosheng save him? "Then what will it take for you to let me go?" Ji Wenkai's entire body trembled uncontrollably. Endless resentment had emerged from the bottom of his heart. However, he was so afraid of death that he did not dare to express his resentment. Ma Chengye chuckled and said, "Senior brother, asking you to admit defeat is nothing more than a blow to the self-confidence of the Array sect disciples. You usually have a high prestige among the Array sect disciples and are the spiritual pillar in the hearts of many Array sect disciples. If you can disregard your image and kneel down to beg for mercy, I'm sure many Array sect disciples will be bitterly disappointed. If even their spiritual pillar is kneeling down to beg for mercy, will the Array sect disciples still have the determination to resist? This way our goal will be achieved. What do you say?" Ji Wenkai was stunned. Plop! Ji Wenkai seemed to have grabbed onto a life-saving straw and actually knelt down in front of Ma Chengye. "Don't kill me. I admit defeat. I admit defeat. The Array sect admits defeat. Don't kill me." Ji Wenkai frantically kowtowed and his body trembled like a sieve. Looking at his pitiful and dirty appearance, even Ma Chengye was stunned. He thought that Ji Wenkai would at least fight a few rounds with him like a man. However, he never expected that his casual words would cause Ji Wenkai to kneel down and beg for mercy without a care for his image. Whoa! All the Array sect disciples were shocked by Ji Wenkai's actions. Ji Wenkai was usually the dragon-head snake among the Culmination sect disciples. He was extremely talented and had extraordinary array skills. However, at this moment, he was so frightened by the Symbol sect disciples that he was kneeling down and begging for mercy like a slug. Chapter 463. However, the despair that they had imagined did not appear on the faces of the Array faction disciples. On the contrary, everyone began to roar angrily and scold Ji Wenkai for being shameless and unfit to be a disciple of the Array faction. Ji Wenkai had overlooked one point. He and Luo Filong had always used various shameless methods to oppress the culmination sect disciples. They had already incurred the wrath of the heavens, and everyone had a bellyful of resentment towards them. At the very least, Luo Filong had won the first round of the competition. However, Ji Wenkai had shamelessly knelt down in front of him. This had angered all the Array faction disciples. All the disciples of the Array faction had been taught to hate the members of the Symbol faction since they had joined the Array faction. In their hearts, the members of the Symbol faction were their enemies. They could choose to lose or forfeit, but they would never be willing to kneel on the ground and beg for mercy like a dog. Coward! Our Array faction doesn't have a dog like you. How shameless! Members of the Symbol faction, kill him for us. We'd rather die in battle than kneel and beg for mercy like you. In an instant, Ji Wenkai's pitiful actions had backfired and stirred up the blood in the hearts of the Array faction disciples. They roared loudly and treated Ji Wenkai as the disgrace of the Array faction. They wished that they could charge forward and kill Ji Wenkai with their own hands. The members of the Symbol faction had sensed that something was amiss. They had wanted to kill Ji Wenkai to make the disciples of the Array faction feel despair. However, why were all the disciples so agitated now? And it was as if they wished for Ji Wenkai's death more than they did. Actually, Ma Chengye was in the wrong. If he had killed Ji Wenkai, the disciples of the Array faction would indeed feel the power of the Symbol faction and feel powerless to resist. However, Ma Chengye did not understand that there was such a thing as dignity. The Array faction could lose to the Symbol faction and their confidence could be shattered. However, no one was allowed to be as spineless as Ji Wenkai, who had knelt on the ground and begged for mercy before the battle had even begun. Yi Hong alone was already looked down upon. Ji Wenkai's actions were even more detestable. Ji Wenkai was now like a rat crossing the street and everyone wanted to beat him up. He listened to the insults from the disciples of the Array faction in horror. Then, he looked at the gloomy faces of the people from the Talisman faction. He knew that he was in an awkward situation. He was used to acting like a tyrant in the Array sect and had leaked a lot of information about the Array sect to the Talisman sect. However, the Talisman sect had intended to kill him to affect the morale of the Array sect. In order to survive, he had chosen to beg for mercy without any dignity. However, he had unintentionally angered all the disciples of the Array sect. Ji Wenkai's expression had already sunk into madness. He finally understood how foolish it was for him to choose to be a spy in the Array faction. The members of the Talisman faction were not kind people. All of them were abandoned pawns that were thrown away after they were done with them. They did not cherish them at all. He'd become extremely deranged. The curses in the surroundings, Ma Chengye's ghastly killing intent, the Talisman Grandmaster's abandonment. Everything was tormenting him, causing his eyes to turn completely red. At the same time, he was clearly aware that it was impossible for him to have a good ending today, so he suddenly leaped up and pounced towards Ma Chengye. Even if I die, I'll drag someone down with me. However, Zhou Jinglin had been paying attention to Ji Wenkai's movements. When Ji Wenkai had stood up, Zhou Jinglin had already activated the God Annihilation Talisman. Ji Wenkai was not a genius like Mu Chenghong. Mu Chenghong had found a way to temporarily suppress the God Annihilation Talisman, but Ji Wenkai had not. He was completely unable to withstand the power of the God Annihilation Talisman. In the blink of an eye, countless red lights had appeared on his body and instantly wiped out Ji Wenkai's consciousness. Ji Wenkai had collapsed before he could even pounce on Ma Chengye. Ma Chengye was not an idiot either. He had already anticipated that Ji Wenkai would counterattack before he died, so he immediately grabbed the opportunity and sent Ji Wenkai flying with his palm. Ji Wenkai's body was like a broken sandbag as he fell out of the Array martial arena. Thump! Ji Wenkai's body slammed heavily onto the ground and he was dead. That's a good death. We don't need such a spineless person. That's right. We must defeat the Talisman Grandmaster fair and square. Ji Wenkai's death had actually caused a huge uproar. This was something that the members of the Talisman faction had not expected. The cheerful cheers from the crowd seemed to be even more exciting than winning the competition. After the Talisman Grandmaster had killed Ji Wenkai, they did not achieve the desired effect. This made Chang Tiancheng's expression turn ugly. He had originally wanted to treat the Array Talisman competition as a game and wantonly toy with everyone from the Array sect. He wanted to let them see hope and then fall to the bottom before exterminating the Array sect. However, the direction of this game had already deviated from their control. Among the disciples present, Luo Failong and a few spies were stunned when they saw Ji Wenkai and Zhang Kai's death. The two of them were clearly from the Talisman faction, but the Talisman faction had actually killed Zhang Kai and Ji Wenkai in front of them. The Talisman faction's actions did not disappoint the Array sect disciples. Instead, it made the spies feel bitterly disappointed. They had served the Talisman faction loyally for so many years, but they had actually killed them without any regard for the feelings of the other spies. They were truly inhumane. Luo Failong wanted to resist. He wanted to lead all the spies to resist, but when he thought of the God Annihilation Talisman on him, he immediately became dejected. If he wanted to resist, Zhou Jinglin only needed to think about it and he would die an unnatural death in an instant. Luo Failong's heart was like dead ashes. He knew that he was finished. He had been a spy for so many years and had not died in the hands of the Array sect. In the end, he was going to die in the hands of his own boss. How tragic! He was at a loss because even if he were to escape now, only death would await him once Zhou Jinglin discovered him. No matter where he fled to, the God Annihilation Talisman would make him pay with his life. The God Annihilation Talisman was a talisman technique that could only be set up by the combined efforts of more than 10 Khanate talisman masters. It was extremely vicious and complicated. Even Zhuge Shaoxing could not break it, let alone him. However, no one in the array had the time to pay attention to Luo Failong's situation. They began to pay attention to the victors of this year's Array Talisman competition. At this moment, the Talisman faction and the Array sect had won 4 rounds each. The final round of the competition would determine the final victor. Ma Qingye had just walked down when Ling Jing floated onto the arena like a ghost. Then, a domineering aura was instantly released, not concealing the murderous intent in the slightest. His appearance caused all the disciples of the Array sect to hold their breaths. This person's aura was extremely terrifying. Ling Jing, the 67th Extreme Immortal. In the Array Talisman competition, the Talisman faction and the Array sect have won 4 rounds each. Then, let's have a final battle. Ling Jing coldly scanned the surroundings. Then, his provocative gaze landed on Muyu. His goal was to kill this rising star of the Array sect and make the Array sect fall into complete despair. The disciples of the Array sect fell into a dead silence once again. This was because Ling Zheng's aura was not the slightest bit weaker than Mu Qinghong's aura. However, at this moment, the Array sect could no longer find any Khanate disciples who could match up to Mu Qinghong. Everyone's gaze landed on Muyu. Then, they sighed helplessly. There was indeed a very powerful Khanate disciple in the Array sect recently. Everyone knew that he was Feng Mu. However, Feng Mu's cultivation was only at the Jindan period. This was a fact that everyone knew. Although Feng Mu's talent was high, because he started cultivating later, it was normal for his cultivation to not catch up. If the Array sect wanted to win this year's Array Talisman competition, they had to win this last round. However, no one believed that Feng Mu would be able to fight against Ling Jing, who was at the 9th level of the out-of-body realm. Damn it! We just need to win one more round. That's right. Just one more round. If only we had a few more years. At that time, Feng Mu would definitely be able to defeat the Talisman faction. But it's not likely that we'll have the chance to win 4 rounds in a few more years. The disciples of the Array sect shook their heads and sighed. They lamented that their luck was not on their side. They also lamented that Feng Mu was born at the wrong time. If he was born a few years earlier and joined the Array sect earlier, he would definitely be able to lead the Array sect to victory this year. Unfortunately, Feng Mu was only a disciple who had just joined the Array sect for half a year. No matter how high his talent was, his experience could not be compared to Ling Zheng, who had been famous for a long time. Most importantly, Ling Zheng was the 67th Supreme Immortal on the Supreme Immortal list. His ranking was even higher than Mu Qinghong's. Mu Yu's gaze was calm. He was ranked 67th? Feng Mu, forfeit. Master Lu suddenly stopped Mu Yu. He had been feeling uneasy today, but even he did not know what had happened. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Mu Yu looked at Master Lu and smiled. Master Lu shook his head. I don't know why, but I keep feeling that something is wrong. I even have a bad premonition. As you can see, this year's Array Talisman competition is a life and death competition. Your talent is too high. Ling Zheng will definitely kill you. We can lose this year's Array Talisman competition, but we can't lose you. These words were from the bottom of Master Lu's heart. Before he was controlled by Zhou Jinglin, he was still the elder who cared about Mu Yu. Unfortunately, even he himself did not know his own situation. He was now concerned about Mu Yu's safety, but his existence had seriously affected Mu Yu's safety. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Mu Yu was very grateful for Master Lu's concern. He nodded comfortingly at Master Lu. If you can't do it, remove the formation. Remember, we will save you as soon as possible, Zhuge Shaoxing said. If Mu Yu insisted on going, there was nothing he could do. All he could do was try his best to ensure Mu Yu's safety. Removing the formation meant admitting defeat, and he had a reason to intervene. At that time, even if Chang Tiancheng tried to stop him, there were 19 Xiantian Array Masters in the Array sect. There would always be one who could save Mu Yu from Ling Zheng. Okay, I know. Mu Yu slowly walked onto the Array martial field under everyone's worried eyes and looked quietly at Ling Zheng. You are Feng Mu? A cultivator from the Jindan period. Why is there no one from your Array sect who can go up on the field? Ling Zheng sneered. Mu Yu felt a little strange. When he was at the South Star Taoist Temple, he had clearly beaten Mo Ziming away. Did the people of the Array sect not know this? How could they be so naive to think that his cultivation was from the Jindan period? In fact, this matter was deliberately concealed by Mo Ziming. Mo Ziming was a proud and arrogant person and was the 71st Extreme Immortal. When he was ordered to assassinate Mu Yu, he always thought that it was a simple matter. He did not expect that he would almost die in the hands of an unknown Mu Yu. After returning, Mo Ziming did not tell everyone what happened because he did not want the people of the Array sect to be stronger than him. Therefore, he concealed the fact that Feng Mu's cultivation was at the spirit-severing stage and told others that Feng Mu was rescued by a spirit-severing stage Array Master. Since Mo Ziming did not know Mu Yu's true cultivation, Mu Yu was too lazy to explain anything to him. He just said indifferently, "To deal with you, I was from the Jindan period. Arrogant and conceited. Let me teach you how to write the word death." Ling Zheng said coldly. This is not arrogance, but integrity. Our Array sect has never played any sinister trick. Do you really think that we don't know that Ji Wenkai and the others are from your talisman sect? In my eyes, everyone in your talisman sect is the same as Ji Wenkai. Mu Yu's eyes were filled with a murderous intent. A wave of battle intent also spread from the bottom of his heart. This wasn't just a competition that concerned the dignity of the Array faction, it was also a competition that would arouse the fighting spirit of the Array faction's disciples. If Mu Yu were to win, The disciples of the Array faction would have even more confidence when they faced the attacks of the Talisman sect. Chapter 464. Do you think Ji Wenkai is one of us just because you said so? Ling Jing snorted coldly. Although Ji Wenkai, Luo Feilong, and the others were spies of the Talisman sect, they had learned authentic array technique. The Talisman sect had never acknowledged their existence. It doesn't matter where they came from. I don't care even if the people behind them are a bunch of beasts. We're not fighting for beasts or their own kind. Don't you agree? Mu Yu's lips curled into a mocking smile. Ling Zheng's expression was ugly. Mu Yu's indirect insults had infuriated him immensely. With a slight movement of his fingers, 8 purple talisman papers floated out and floated on the martial arts field. Strange and vast talisman patterns intertwined on the 8 talisman papers, and powerful spiritual energy poured out from the talisman papers. You'll only die faster if you try to talk back. Ling Zheng waved his finger, and a majestic spiritual energy instantly transformed into a sharp sword, which stabbed rapidly toward Mu Yu. Mu Yu looked at the sharp sword that was speeding toward him, but he did not rush to dodge. Instead, he asked curiously, I heard that you're the 67th extreme immortal? The King of Hell will tell you whether I am or not. Ling Jing revealed a cruel smile. His sharp sword had locked onto Mu Yu's aura. In his opinion, it was impossible for Mu Yu during the Jindan period to dodge this sharp sword. However, Feng Mu still did not dodge, even though the sword was getting closer and closer. What's wrong with Feng Mu? Why isn't he dodging? He'll be in trouble if he doesn't dodge. He's during the Jindan period. There's no way he can dodge. All the disciples of the Array faction broke out in cold sweat for Mu Yu. In their opinion, Ling Zheng's sharp sword was imbued with immense power and endless killing intent. It was obvious that he was prepared to kill Mu Yu in one blow. However, Feng Mu still did not react. He stood there like a block of wood, and he did not even bother to lift his head. Was he just going to sit and wait for death? This thought popped up in everyone's mind, and a strange expression appeared on their faces. Was Feng Mu really a genius disciple like the rumors said? Why was he so indifferent towards this sharp sword? As far as I'm concerned, the extreme immortals of your talisman sect are nothing much. Mu Yu was still looking indifferently at Ling Jing, and he wasn't flustered at all. The sharp sword was still falling towards him. Everyone's hearts were already in their throats. Ling Zheng was infuriated by Mu Yu. He was extremely angry and couldn't wait to see Mu Yu get pierced by his sword. Wait until my flying sword makes a bloody hole in your body. Let's see if you can still talk back then. Everyone stared at the flying sword, waiting for Mu Yu to be stabbed by the sword. Some people couldn't even bear to watch. That sword was getting closer and closer. Just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. Ling Zheng's sharp sword was getting closer and closer to Mu Yu. Everyone was also waiting for Mu Yu to be pierced by this sword. This was a strange phenomenon. That flying sword was clearly getting closer to Mu Yu. Many people were even prepared to see Mu Yu's blood splattering on the spot. Some people were even prepared to scream. Everyone's hearts were in their throats as they looked at Ling Zheng's sword. The speed of the sword was so fast, and the distance between the two of them was so short. Even if it was a flying sword launched by a chi refining stage cultivator, it could reach Mu Yu in a blink of an eye and flip him over. However, after a few breaths, the sharp sword was still approaching Mu Yu, and the distance between them was gradually shortening. However, no matter how much it shortened, it was always just a little bit more. The small distance was like an insurmountable chasm. Ling Zheng's sharp sword had been stabbing towards Mu Yu for a long time, but it was still flying. 15 minutes passed, and Ling Zheng's sword still hadn't pierced Mu Yu. Your swordsmanship seems to be very bad. Mu Yu's lips curled into a mocking smile. That sharp sword seemed to always be getting closer to him, but it could never get close. It was clearly shortening the distance, but it was always just a little bit more. Could this be so close, yet worlds apart? Zhuge Shaoxing suddenly realized and looked at Mu Yu in shock. One of the array Heavenly Tao's supreme array techniques, so close, yet worlds apart, shrinking the ground into an inch, expanding the ground into a world. This was an extremely high-level array technique. One's understanding of array Tao had to reach a sufficiently high level. It was said that it was one of the top 10 innate array techniques created by the array Heavenly Tao. Even Zhuge Shaoxing hadn't learned it. To learn this array technique, one needed to understand the laws of heaven and earth. It required one to understand the ethereal Heavenly Tao. This kind of law was similar to the way to break through the void. It required one to have a precise grasp of the distance between them. Void walking was something that those above the spirit-severing stage could do. Void walking was more like a spirit-severing stage where one's speed exceeded a certain limit and broke through the shackles of space, appearing from one place to another. So close, yet worlds apart magnified a small distance infinitely. It was like an unreachable shore. It was only a finger's length away, but it was unreachable. Mu Yu hadn't understood the laws of heaven and earth, nor did he understand the ethereal Heavenly Tao. However, his strongest point was his extremely strong deduction ability. He had deduced the mysterious heaven stairway arrangement in the array hall. When the array Heavenly Tao imparted all the array techniques to him, he deduced the array Heavenly Tao's so close, yet worlds apart. The array Heavenly Tao's so close, yet worlds apart was a very complex array technique. With Mu Yu's current understanding of array Tao, he couldn't use it in a vast and boundless world like the array Heavenly Tao. However, he could simulate the effect of so close yet worlds apart within a radius of 10 meters around him. It was more like taking a scoop out of 1,000 scoops of water. Although this scoop was insignificant, it was enough to raise his array techniques to a whole new level. What kind of genius are you? Zhuge Shaoxing's eyes were filled with endless admiration. He knew void walking, but he was still lacking that little bit of understanding of so close, yet worlds apart. He couldn't perfect it. The array Heavenly Tao had once taught Zhuge Shaoxing. He had also learned it for many years. However, he was still unable to grasp the essence of it. Who would have thought that Mu Yu could learn it in just over 20 days? Mu Yu naturally spent more than 20 days. He had already learned for an entire year under the array Heavenly Tao's fingertip. The array Heavenly Tao's array techniques were as vast as the universe's treasure vault. There were countless of them. He only picked a few practical array techniques to deduce. There were many array techniques that he couldn't use because he didn't have enough cultivation. However, under the guidance of the array Heavenly Tao, he kept simplifying these array techniques. Although the power was reduced, there were unexpected effects. What array technique is this? Ling Zheng's eyes revealed a trace of panic. He had already realized that something was wrong. His sharp sword was clearly about to stab Mu Yu. However, it was still a hair's breadth away. This made him feel extremely aggrieved. It wasn't just him, but everyone watching this match also felt depressed. They were all imagining Mu Yu's miserable state, his blood splattering everywhere. Many of them even held their breath. But this scene seemed as if it was going to happen, yet it didn't. This caused many of them to turn red with anger. Senior Array Heavenly Tao once told me that your talisman sect's talisman techniques were actually born out of array technique. You just compressed array techniques into a small piece of talisman paper. However, you didn't admit this. Instead, you wanted to create something new and even wanted to swallow our array Heavenly Tao. What a joke. Today, I will teach you what true array techniques are. Mu Yu was still standing in the same spot. However, his voice seemed to have traveled through time and space. It was as if he was whispering into Ling Zheng's ears. This made Ling Zheng turn his head in shock. He wanted to see who was talking into his ears. However, there was no one. Mu Yu's voice echoed in Ling Zheng's ears. Ling Zheng couldn't accurately pinpoint Mu Yu's position. This was a very strange phenomenon. Mu Yu's figure was right in front of Ling Zheng. However, Ling Zheng couldn't sense any aura from the Mu Yu in front of him. Mu Yu's real aura was always erratic. It was constantly changing left and right, making him feel as if he was facing a great enemy. This was the first time he had encountered such a strange array technique. Pretending to be mysterious. See how I will kill you! Ling Zheng roared. Thousands of talisman papers suddenly surged out from his body. They fluttered in the air like kites and filled the entire array martial field with talisman papers. It was messy and disorderly. However, none of the talisman papers collided with each other. Every talisman paper was faintly flowing with magnificent spiritual qi. They were connected to each other. Then, a small sword suddenly jumped out from each of the talisman papers. They turned into sword shadows that filled the sky and stabbed towards Mu Yu. Ling Zheng's natal talisman technique, Demon Dancing Sword Talisman. With the talisman papers as a guide, thousands of flying swords were sealed. Then, with the supreme talisman technique, the thousands of flying swords were controlled at the same time. It was like a demon dancing wildly. There was order in the chaos, but it was also disorderly. Thousands of swords were released at the same time. It was invincible. Everyone looked at the sky full of sword shadows in the array martial field in surprise and was shocked by the sword array that filled the sky. It was well known that whether it was the array technique or the talisman technique, the sword array and the sword talisman were the most difficult. It required a very strong spiritual force to control many flying swords at the same time. It also required a very strong spiritual force. None of the disciples of the array faction had learned the sword array, and only Ling Zheng in the talisman faction had truly mastered the supreme sword talisman technique. Ling Zheng's sword talisman has reached the point of perfection. I'm afraid that he will be able to enter the top 50 of the Supreme Immortal list in the future. Chang Tiancheng nodded slightly. He looked at Ling Zheng's demon dancing sword talisman proudly. At the same time, he looked at Mu Yu as if he was looking at a dead man. He knew that Mu Yu had touched the threshold of imminent skyline. However, if he wanted to rely on this array technique to resist so many sword talismans, it was simply a fool's dream. Ling Zheng has learned such a powerful sword talisman? Doesn't that mean that Feng Mu is doomed? Zhuge Shaoxing clenched his fists. Feng Mu's imminent skyline could not deal with so many sword talismans in such a small area. He was ready to take action at any time. As long as Mu Yu was in a difficult situation, he would immediately rush forward to rescue Mu Yu. Ling Zheng's talisman technique was so powerful that it cast a shadow over the hearts of all the disciples of the array faction. Under the cover of thousands of sword shadows, even the Daluo immortals would not be able to escape. Everyone had even imagined the tragic scene of Mu Yu being pierced by thousands of swords and turned into a hedgehog. However, Mu Yu only raised his eyebrows slightly and revealed a strange smile. Using sword techniques in front of me? The experts saw the skill, while the layman saw the excitement. Someone actually used sword techniques in front of the disciple of Sword Shadow Qinfeng? Chapter 465. Such a huge talisman technique was no longer something that could be countered by the imminent skyline formation. Mu Yu was unable to take care of the sword shadows attacking from all directions at the same time, so he decisively withdrew the imminent skyline formation. A ferocious smile appeared on Ling Zheng's face again. The sword talisman was his greatest trump card. It was said that swordsmanship was the most difficult skill to master among array masters and talisman masters. However, as a rare genius in talisman grandmaster, Ling Zheng's comprehension of talisman skills had reached a level that even Chang Tiancheng was inferior to. He even successfully mastered the most exquisite demon dancing sword talisman with his outstanding talent. No one in the younger generation of the Talisman Grandmaster was a match for him. The demon dancing sword talisman seemed to be complicated and disorderly, but it actually contained all kinds of wonderful technique. It could change one sword into 10,000 swords. So many sword shadows could be controlled by his mind. Relying on the connection between each sword talisman, it could automatically launch the most powerful attack according to his instructions. If he had not met Jian Ying Chen Feng's disciple, perhaps this demon-dancing sword talisman would indeed be invincible among those of the same level. Mu Yu calmly looked at the sky full of sword shadows. They were already less than a foot away from him. Just when everyone thought that he would not be able to dodge, Mu Yu moved. He took a step forward, and the formation runes around him surged. Then, he suddenly disappeared from where he stood. No one knew how he disappeared, because it was impossible for cultivators below the spirit-severing stage to walk in the void. The moment Mu Yu disappeared, the flying swords that had locked onto Mu Yu's aura all missed. However, none of the flying swords collided with each other. Instead, they cleverly avoided each other and found another sword talisman to enter. Ling Zheng didn't look too surprised because he was already familiar with the array faction's array techniques from his spy. There was a rather powerful spell called the Big Dipper Constellation Formation. The Big Dipper Constellation Formation could instantly teleport the person using the formation to a random location. However, because this location was random, it had a huge flaw. If one was not careful, one could even shift into the opponent's attack range, allowing the opponent to seize the opportunity to deal a fatal blow. Sure enough, Mu Yu's figure had already appeared in a corner of the formation martial field. Ling Jing once again locked onto Mu Yu's aura. Many flying swords jumped out from the thousands of sword talismans, but this time, only a dozen or so flying swords attacked the position where Mu Yu was standing. The rest of the flying swords directly covered the entire martial field, enveloping every corner of the field within the attack range of the flying sword. The flying swords leaped out and disappeared between the sword talismans before leaping out again. These flying swords weaved together in an orderly manner on the entire formation martial field, covering every corner without leaving a single gap. The Big Dipper Constellation Formation teleports to a random location. Your formation technique can only be used on the formation martial field. You can only appear at a certain location on the formation martial field. Right now, the entire formation martial field is covered by my sword talisman. No matter how you use the Big Dipper Constellation Formation to teleport, you will die under my sword talisman. Ling Jing sneered sinisterly. This was the weakness of the Big Dipper Constellation Formation. It could allow the person using the formation technique to randomly teleport within a certain range. If Mu Yu wanted to win this formation talisman competition, then his formation technique could only be used on the entire formation martial field. However, Ling Jing used his sword talisman to transform the formation martial field into his own killing field. No matter where Mu Yu randomly appeared, what welcomed him would definitely be ice-cold flying swords. Over a dozen flying swords stabbed towards Mu Yu. The formation patterns on Mu Yu's body surged once again, and he had already disappeared. Ling Zheng's attention was all on the entire formation martial field. He knew that Mu Yu would definitely appear at a random location on the formation martial field. This location was not something that Mu Yu could control. As long as he appeared again, he would definitely not be able to escape death. When Zhuge Shaoxing saw Mu Yu use the Big Dipper Constellation Formation to dodge the 1,000 swords piercing the heart, he didn't even have time to heave a sigh of relief when he discovered Ling Zheng's plan. He had to admit that Ling Zheng's approach was very correct. He completely restrained the Big Dipper Constellation Formation of the Formation sect. Once again, he was worried about Mu Yu. If Mu Yu's next teleportation location happened to be passed by a flying sword, then Mu Yu would definitely be in danger. Everyone was waiting for Mu Yu's next appearance. Everyone knew that Mu Yu used the very mysterious Big Dipper constellation formation. However, this Big Dipper constellation formation disappeared and appeared almost instantaneously. It was impossible for it to stay in a certain place. They also knew that Mu Yu's next random location had been covered by Ling Zheng's flying swords, and there was no place for him to step on. However, the next moment, everyone's eyes widened. "Do you think your demon dancing sword talisman can restrain my Big Dipper constellation formation?" Mu Yu's voice was mixed with banter. Everyone saw that Mu Yu actually appeared directly behind Ling Zheng. He was so close to Ling Zheng, and he was facing Ling Zheng's back. At the same time, Mu Yu's sword stabbed towards Ling Zheng's back. Clang! Ling Zheng's reaction was not slow. A dark golden light emerged from his body, which blocked Mu Yu's sword momentum and resolved Mu Yu's fatal sword attack. "You are so lucky! You happened to be teleported behind me?" Not only Ling Zheng, but everyone was very surprised. Everyone knew that although the Big Dipper constellation formation could teleport within a certain range, the position was uncontrollable. Although the killing intent of Ling Zheng's demon dancing sword talisman covered the whole formation martial arts field, there was a gap near his body. He did not think that Mu Yu's Big Dipper constellation formation would appear right beside him. The probability was too low, like looking for a needle in a haystack. Ling Zheng turned around and immediately mobilized a small part of the sword talismans in the northwest of the formation martial arts field to seal the gap behind him. At the same time, Mu Yu disappeared again. "Let's see how lucky you can be this time." Ling Zheng calmed himself down and thought that Mu Yu's teleportation position was just good luck, so she just happened to appear behind him. He used the sword talismans in the northwest of the formation martial arts field to fill the gap behind him, which meant that there was a gap there, and the sword talismans in other places of the formation martial arts field needed to be readjusted. After all, these sword talismans were interconnected, and moving one would affect all of them. He thought that no matter how lucky Mu Yu was, it was impossible for him to randomly appear in the gap in the northwest this time. He focused on other places of the formation martial arts field, but after waiting for a long time, he still did not see Mu Yu's figure. Just as he was feeling puzzled, he inadvertently glanced at the gap in the northwest, and then his pupils shrank. Mu Yu's figure suddenly appeared there. "How is this possible?" Ling Zheng was shocked. How could the Big Dipper constellation formation just so happen to teleport Mu Yu there? Not only him, but even Zhuge Shaoxing was very surprised. Although the Big Dipper constellation formation sometimes had unexpected effects, because the position was too random, it was basically not used unless it was a last resort. However, Mu Yu had teleported to Ling Zheng's gap twice in a row. Wasn't the probability too low? It must be luck. Ling Zheng gritted his teeth and then controlled all the flying swords to attack in the northwest direction. All the sword talismans immediately adjusted their positions, and at the same time, a gap appeared in the south of the formation martial arts field again. "I don't believe you will appear there this time." Ling Zheng snorted, but he was soon stunned again because Mu Yu's figure actually appeared in the south. Once or twice could be considered a coincidence, but 3 times was obviously not a coincidence. "Impossible! How can you control the position of your teleportation?" Ling Zheng was shocked and angry at the same time. The Big Dipper constellation formation could allow people to teleport. If they moved away at the critical moment, they would definitely be able to escape from death. This formation was very powerful, but it also made it uncontrollable. The more powerful the formation was, the more obvious the flaw was. Randomness was the shortcoming of the Big Dipper constellation formation. "As you said, I was lucky." Mu Yu calmly looked at Ling Zheng, who was already a little flustered. His demon dancing sword talisman was really powerful, covering the whole formation martial arts field. Mu Yu's Big Dipper constellation formation could only be used on the Big Dipper constellation formation. It could not leave this boundary, and even the height was limited. But how could his Big Dipper constellation formation be compared with the ordinary Big Dipper constellation formation? He had inadvertently discovered that his dustfall footwork was perfectly compatible with the Big Dipper constellation formation. Furthermore, he could control where he appeared next as he pleased. Now, when he executed the Big Dipper constellation formation, he had already made up for the flaws of this formation technique and executed it perfectly. Impossible! No matter how lucky you are, you can't just appear in the gap of my sword talisman, Ling Jing said angrily. His sword talisman covered Mu Yu, leaving no room for Mu Yu to move. But just like the Big Dipper constellation formation, the demon dancing sword talisman also had its shortcomings. Once the talisman was arranged by him, the whole range could no longer be readjusted. Only a small part could be changed, but a small change would lead to loopholes in other positions. It was like tearing down the east wall to repair the west wall. Originally, this gap had always been behind him. But when Mu Yu seized the gap for the first time, he began to mobilize the sword talismans in other positions to fill this gap. This meant that there were loopholes in other places, but this loophole was too small. He did not believe that Mu Yu could do this with the Big Dipper constellation formation. Why is it impossible? I'm very lucky today. Mu Yu smiled. The flying swords around him flew here and there from time to time, but the place where he stood always happened to avoid the attacks of the flying swords. Ling Jing could never imagine how profound his attainments in the formation were. Ling Jing's sword talismans seemed to be numerous, but after all, they were all spells. All spells had a certain pattern. Mu Yu could deduce the complicated way of the array hall ascending heaven, so it was more than enough for him to deduce Ling Jing's sword talisman. Unless Ling Jing could perfectly cover the gap of his sword talisman, it was impossible for him to cause any harm to Mu Yu. Ling Jing was extremely angry. After repeatedly mobilizing the sword talisman, he found that Mu Yu could always find loopholes in the sword talisman's spell and was not hurt by his talisman art. He was ranked 67th on the list of supreme immortals. Originally, he wanted to kill Mu Yu easily and destroy the hope of the array formation sect. However, until now, he had not caught a hair of Mu Yu, which was an insult to his dignity. He stopped and stopped changing the position of the sword talisman. Instead, he stared coldly at Mu Yu and said, "No matter how lucky you are, what can you do? Are you going to play hide and seek with me for the rest of your life today?" Indeed, Mu Yu was standing in the gap of the demon dancing sword talisman. He could not attack Ling Jing, and Ling Jing could not touch Mu Yu. The two of them seemed to be in a deadlock and were in a passive position. In contrast, Ling Jing had more initiative, but he could not hurt Mu Yu. Mu Yu stretched and said lazily, "It turns out that you don't like hide and seek. Then let's talk about swordsmanship." "What? You want to talk about swordsmanship with me?" Ling Jing sneered. His sword talisman was the most powerful spell of the talisman sect. No one had ever dared to talk about swordsmanship in front of him. The demon-dancing sword talisman was not only what was seen in the array martial arts field today, but it was only one of its manifestations. Chapter 466. Ha ha! Ling Jing looked as if he had heard the funniest joke. He stared at Mu Yu mockingly and said, "How dare you talk about swordsmanship in front of me when you're in the Jindan period?" Ling Jing still did not feel the out-of-body period cultivation from Mu Yu. He still thought that Mu Yu's cultivation was only in the Jindan period. He thought that Mu Yu's formation skills were mostly supported by the powerful spiritual qi of the innate formation foundation, not Mu Yu's own cultivation. As long as the spiritual qi contained in the innate formation foundation was strong enough, it could make a person with outstanding talent but low cultivation perform better than usual. Moreover, Mu Yu's formation skills were all defensive and did not take the initiative to attack. Once he took the initiative to attack, he would know how weak he was in front of an out-of-body period. But even if he kept dodging, he was extremely powerful in the eyes of ordinary people. After all, no cultivator in the Jindan period could last so long in front of an out-of-body period talisman master, let alone a supreme immortal who ranked 67th on the supreme immortal list. Everyone thought that Mu Yu should be proud of this. Your demon dancing sword talisman only relies on the control of the talisman technique. It's not authentic swordsmanship at all. These swords look flashy but have no substance. Mu Yu's voice fell into everyone's ears without any concealment. What? Did I hear it wrong? Feng Mu thinks Ling Zheng's swordsmanship is flashy but have no substance? Although I don't like people from the Talisman Grandmaster, swordsmanship belongs to the top of the talisman technique and formation skills. No one in our formation sect can fully master the sword formation. It seems that Ling Zheng is the only one in the Talisman Grandmaster who has mastered the sword talisman. Feng Mu's words are too arrogant. That's not necessarily true. Have you forgotten? It is said that our patriarch, Formation Heavenly Tao, has mastered a superb sword formation. Feng Mu has learned formation skills from our patriarch for a month. Maybe our patriarch has taught him the superb sword formation. Stop joking. It hasn't even been a month. No matter how talented Feng Mu is, what can he learn? The disciples of the Array faction began to whisper amongst themselves. They should have been standing on Mu Yu's side, but Mu Yu's words made them feel that they were biased. Many people began to point at Mu Yu. Chang Tianqing sneered as he looked at Zhuge Shaoxing and said, "Sect Master Zhuge, your sect's disciple really dares to spout nonsense. Could it be that your genius disciple also knows an even more powerful sword formation?" Zhuge Shaoxing also felt that Mu Yu's words were too arrogant. Sword techniques were the most noble of all techniques. In the past, Sword Shadow Qin Feng had relied on the world-famous Heavenly Sword 9 Guides sword formation to defeat 5 Spirit Lords Yu Meng, establishing the supreme status of sword techniques in one fell swoop. Putting everything else aside, he knew that Sword Shadow Qin Feng had left behind an extremely powerful sword aura in the Array faction's Sky Sword Pavilion. He even relied on the Heavenly Sword 9 Guides to defeat the most outstanding Array master in the history of the Array faction, Array Tiandao. However, Array Tiandao had never allowed them to learn sword techniques unless they could withstand the test of the Heavenly Sword 9 Guide. When Zhuge Shaoxing was young, he also wanted to go to the Sky Sword Mound to give it a try. However, he was also defeated by the Killing God in the Wilderness of Death. He couldn't even grasp the slightest bit of the aura of the Heavenly Sword 9 Guides, so he had long given up on exploring sword formations. Although he didn't know how much Feng Mu had learned from Array Tiandao, he couldn't show weakness at this time. He replied indifferently, "Feng Mu naturally has his reasons for saying this. You should worry about your own people first. Don't let your Ling Zheng lose to Feng Mu in the sword technique that he's most proficient in. That would be a joke." What? Do you really think that a disciple from the Jindan period can win in the final competition? Chang Tianqing sneered without any scruples. Ling Zheng only used less than 1 level of his sword technique just now. Feng Mu is dead for sure today. Chang Tianqing was very confident in Ling Zheng's talisman skills. To be honest, he even concluded that if Ling Zheng had his current cultivation, he might not even be a match for him in the talisman skills competition. Ling Zheng's talent was second to none. What he lacked now was only his cultivation. Zhuge Shaoxing snorted. He knew that Ling Zheng had already killed Feng Mu. However, he was also prepared to save Feng Mu at any time. He absolutely couldn't let Ling Zheng's plan to kill a genius succeed. Ling Zheng stared at Mu Yu and said, "Then I'll personally teach you what the real sword technique is today." The sword talismans that filled the sky were suddenly all collected by Ling Zheng like birds returning to their nest. Then, Ling Zheng's aura became extremely fierce. He no longer intended to play the game of cat and mouse. He was ready to use the real demon dancing sword talisman. Ling Zheng's figure suddenly became illusory. Then, the talisman patterns around him began to surge and wrap his body. Then, countless Ling Zhengs rose from the ground and covered the whole formation martial arts field. Every figure of Ling Zheng was so solid that it was hard to tell whether they were real or fake. They held flying swords in their hands and showed their sharpness. The demon dancing sword talisman could not only divide the sword into many swords, but also transform the person who used the talisman skill into many figures. At this moment, 200 figures of Ling Zheng appeared in the air from various directions. Each of them looked like a real person. Talisman Shadow Doppelganger was a powerful talisman skill. It could transform into many figures of oneself. The aura of each doppelganger was the same as the original, and it was hard to tell whether they were real or fake. This talisman skill combined with the demon dancing sword talisman could maximize the power of the swordsmanship and have great lethality. Although the talisman Shadow Doppelganger could transform into many doppelgangers, not all the doppelgangers were independent. Their movements were the same as the original, so it was difficult to make any effective attacks. However, after combining with the demon dancing sword talisman, each doppelganger could independently respond to the changes around him and give full play to the swordsmanship. 200 figures of Ling Zheng appeared on the formation martial arts field. Each of them moved differently and emitted a terrible momentum, which made many disciples of the formation faction tremble with fear. With such a powerful talisman skill, it was as if one person was fighting against thousands of troops and horses. Those who were not strong enough would even choose to surrender directly. This time, I'll see you run again. Ling Zheng, who was closest to Mu Yu, rushed over with a murderous intent. Many Ling Zhengs also moved from different angles with their swords, ready to give a fatal blow when Mu Yu showed up with the Big Dipper constellation formation. At this moment, the demon dancing sword talisman was different from before. The flying swords no longer needed to move between the sword talismans. Instead, they were controlled by the doppelganger. The doppelganger could fly at will and make the best attack, which made up for the defect of robbing Peter to pay Paul. Mu Yu, do you need help from me and the big earthworm? We can try the newly invented wind-wind heart-linking formation. I want to use Xiao Shuai's mysterious thunder to shock him. I think he needs electricity. Xiao Shuai rubbed his palms and said, No, I can deal with him alone. Mu Yu did not move. He just looked coldly at Ling Zheng, who was stabbing at him with his sword. Then, he gently stretched out 2 fingers and caught Ling Zheng's sword without any fancy move. His out-of-body stage cultivation spread out unreservedly and filled the whole formation martial arts field. You're an out-of-body stage cultivator? Ling Zheng was shocked. Not only him, but all the disciples of the formation faction were stunned. They always thought that although the new genius disciple Feng Mutian had outstanding talent, his cultivation could not keep up with the others. But they never expected that Feng Mutian was also an out-of-body stage cultivator. How can Feng Mutian be an out-of-body stage cultivator? Isn't he in the Jindan period? Oh my god! Feng Mutian is an out-of-body stage cultivator. Does that mean there's hope for our formation faction to win this competition? The disciples of the formation faction cheered when they saw Mu Yu reveal his true cultivation. At first, they did not have any hope for Mu Yu to win. But now that Mu Yu revealed his true cultivation, everyone was shocked. They immediately realized that it was very likely that Mu Yu would lead the formation faction to victory. Zhuge Shaoxing was also shocked. This matter was even hidden from him. Mu Yu had always shown his cultivation during the Jindan period in front of him. This had always been the regret of all Xiantian formation masters. But he never thought that Mu Yu would hide it so deeply and successfully deceive everyone. Zhuge Xiaosheng looked at Master Lu and realized that Master Lu's face was also filled with confusion and surprise. Master Lu was usually the closest to Mu Yu, but he did not know about it. But Master Lu's face suddenly became excited. Feng Mutian always gave him many unexpected surprises. No matter why Feng Mutian hid his cultivation, it did not matter to him. What was important was that this competition was no longer a one-sided battle. Although I don't know why you hid your cultivation, I hope you can win this competition. The formation faction still needs to rely on you. Zhuge Xiaosheng's heart was also pounding. This low-key child always surprised people. Mu Yu had an out-of-body stage cultivation. Perhaps he could really defeat the most powerful genius disciple of the Talisman faction, Ling Zheng. Mu Yu exerted a little force with his fingers and a crisp bang sounded. The sword in Ling Zheng's hand had been broken by him. He slapped his palm forward and heavily hit Ling Zheng's chest, directly tearing the Ling Zheng in front of him into pieces. The Ling Zheng turned into runes and disappeared. I have only maintained the cultivation of the Jindan period, but it does not mean that I have the cultivation of the Jindan period. Mu Yu glanced coldly at the remaining Ling Zheng and continued, I have heard of the talisman Shadow Doppelganger. Although it is powerful, the doppelganger also distributes your strength. You have created so many doppelganger. I'm afraid you can only use 40% of your strength. How can you fight me with 40% of your strength? Very good. You have indeed surprised me. Every Ling Zheng said sternly. Their voices were like muffled thunder that resounded throughout the entire formation martial field. But 40% of my strength is more than enough to deal with you. Is that so? Mu Yu's shadow doppelganger sword had already appeared in his hand. It was only now that he truly attacked. Mysterious formation runes began to surge and enveloped Mu Yu's entire body. Then, the shadow doppelganger sword in his hand trembled slightly and emitted a cold light. It gradually merged into the void and disappeared. However, Ling Zheng was shocked to find that he seemed to be in a huge sword chi domain. It was as if there were countless swords in the entire formation martial field pointing at him. The biting cold sword chi was hidden in the surroundings. Ling Zheng felt that if he moved slightly, his heart would be pierced by thousands of swords. Chapter 467. I'll teach you how to use a sword, Mu Yu said with a smile. He took a step forward and grabbed at a Ling Zheng beside him with his empty hands. Humph, you don't even have a sword in your hand, and you want to teach me how to use a sword? Ling Zheng's clone that was locked onto by Mu Yu sneered. Then, the sword in his hand moved again and stabbed at Mu Yu. Mu Yu's figure moved up nimbly. Then, his right hand grasped the air as though the sword was in his hand in the vast void. But in the eyes of others, his right hand seemed to be grabbing the air and was about to clash with Ling Zheng's flying sword. But no one expected that when Mu Yu's right hand clashed with Ling Zheng's flying sword, mysterious ripples would appear on his fingertip. It was as though his hand was touching a calm water surface. Then, the shadow clone sword seemed to be pulled out from the ripples in the air and appeared in his hand. A majestic sword energy suddenly exploded and instantly destroyed the Ling Zheng in front of him. With a sword in my heart, there will be swords everywhere around me. Mu Yu's body technique floated as though he was taking a stroll. After killing one Ling Zheng, the shadow clone sword in his hand merged into the void again, as though it had returned to its mission and disappeared. Next, Mu Yu took another step forward, arriving in front of another clone. Her right hand seemed to casually swipe through the air, causing the runes to ripple again. The shadow sword was pulled out from the void once more, and in the blink of an eye, yet another clone was destroyed. All of the Ling Zhengs charged at him, but he always dodged at a steady pace. Every time, he didn't have a sword in his hand. Only when he was killing the clones would he easily pull out the shadow clone sword. The shadow clone sword would only appear for less than a breath. Swoosh! Mu Yu's figure was like a green light. His body was as light as a swallow, and his figure was ethereal. He flew freely on the formation martial field and killed each of Ling Zheng's clones. Ling Zheng looked very powerful. Although he had many swords, he lacked true sword moves. Ling Zheng's sword was more like a crude slash. In front of Mu Yu's nimble movements and swordsmanship, it couldn't even last a breath of time. Everyone looked at Mu Yu's movements in horror. His movements were so free and easy, like a fallen leaf in the wind, moving with the wind, but always just right to kill Ling Zheng's doppelgangers. In the blink of an eye, a quarter of Ling Zheng's clones were gone. I've already said that your sword talisman is too flashy. You've never learned any sword techniques, so how can you unleash the power of the sword talisman? Mu Yu shook his head gently. Ling Zheng's understanding of the sword talisman was like using the talisman art to control one's flying sword to kill people. It was just simple slashing and picking, relying only on brute force and momentum, plus a large number of people. There was no sword intent, nor any skillful sword moves. Once it was separated from the talisman technique, his sword was nothing. It was even worse than an ordinary self-cultivator. This kind of sword talisman had nothing to do with swordsmanship at all. The true swordsmanship referred to the combination of the talisman art and sword moves. Whether it was the sword formation or the sword talisman, it required the sword user to at least learn powerful sword moves. Even if he didn't use the talisman art or the talisman art, the sword in his hand could still unleash the most powerful killing power. Ling Zheng's sword was very sad. He thought that he had mastered the essence of the demon-dancing sword talisman by using the powerful talisman art to control hundreds of flying swords. He didn't know that his sword talisman was just a piece of sh*t. It could only unleash a little fancy power with the support of the talisman grandmaster's talisman paper. He was still complacent about mastering such a sword talisman. The true demon-dancing sword talisman needed to be controlled. Each sword had its own sword intent and sword move. Once each sword was formed independently, it could unleash a terrible power. If Ling Zheng removed the talisman art and fought with people of the same cultivation, his sword couldn't even withstand one move from an ordinary swordsman. The reason why the 9 Guides of Heavenly Sword was so powerful was that it had its own sword move. It was tangible and intentional, and had unparalleled skills. Before Mu Yu came to the Formation Sect, he could defeat many opponents with only the sword moves of the 9 Guides of Heavenly Sword without the help of the Formation Sect. Now, after he had mastered the sword formation, he was like a fish in water. He had fully unleashed the true essence of the 9 Guides of Heavenly Sword. The combination of the two had reached the stage where the sword was born from the heart and could be used anywhere. Impossible! How could you learn the swordsmanship? Ling Zheng looked at Mu Yu in disbelief. In fact, Ling Zheng had long known that his demon-dancing sword talisman lacked something. So far, he was the only one in the Talisman Grandmaster who could figure out the way to control the demon-dancing sword talisman and successfully control hundreds of flying sword. Therefore, he was regarded as a rare genius in sword Tao by the ignorant Talisman Grandmaster. Chang Tiancheng spent the best innate talisman paper on him for his use, hoping that he could make some achievements in the sword talisman Tao. Indeed, he lived up to everyone's expectations and successfully became the top disciple in the Talisman Grandmaster with his talent in Talisman Tao. However, one could tell whether an expert was good or bad as soon as he made a move. This sword talisman was quite ridiculous in front of Mu Yu. Only Mu Yu could hit the nail on the head and point out the weakness of Ling Zheng's sword talisman. Even if Ling Zheng learned the most basic sword move and integrated it into the sword talisman, it would still be stronger than his current situation. If Ling Zheng did not learn a real sword move, it would be impossible for him to unleash the power of the sword talisman. You people in the Talisman Grandmaster always think that you are great, but you have neglected the fact that there is always someone better than you. I know the sword formation because I know what it is, but you don't. Mu Yu's figure flashed again and the shadow-splitting sword moved back and forth. He had already smashed half of Ling Zheng's doppelgangers on the formation martial field. Ling Zheng's face twisted as he roared, "Nonsense, I am the #1 genius of the Talisman Grandmaster. Only I know how to use the sword. You are just bluffing." As he spoke, all of his clones suddenly let out a loud roar. Then, they transformed into streaks of light that swept towards Mu Yu. Ling Zheng was confused by Mu Yu's words. When he saw that Mu Yu could control the flying swords so casually, he knew that Mu Yu was telling the truth. He was indeed inferior to Mu Yu. However, he was the #1 genius of the Talisman Grandmaster and was extremely arrogant. How could he admit that he was inferior to a disciple of the Array faction? The Array faction was already in their pocket. If he could not even defeat a mere disciple of the Array faction, wouldn't it be the biggest joke in the world? Countless flying swords whistled through the air as they slashed down towards Mu Yu. There was no technique to speak of. These swords seemed so childish in front of Mu Yu. They were like babies who had just learned how to walk and wanted to race with him. He found it extremely amusing. Mu Yu stabilized his figure. He did not attack again and merely stood there. The air seemed to have solidified as all the swords were about to pierce his body. At this moment Mu Yu moved. Every movement of his caused profound formation runes to ripple. As the formation runes fluctuated, countless sword chi shot out from the formation runes. After that, thousands of shadow-splitting swords suddenly erupted with him as the center. Countless shadow-splitting swords were mixed with a courageous aura as they scattered in all directions and shattered all the talisman doppelgangers that were attacking him. Bang! Ling Zheng's body fell heavily to the ground. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his face was filled with unconcealable shock and unwillingness. All the talisman doppelgangers in the air had been destroyed by Mu Yu in a single move. It was done cleanly and without any hesitation. Ling Zheng stared blankly at Mu Yu who was in the air. He had actually been defeated. He had been defeated by an unknown disciple of the Array faction. This was a great humiliation. The deep sense of humiliation caused his face to flush red. He was the #1 genius of the Talisman faction. How could he have been defeated? His opponent must have cheated. I refuse to accept this. Ling Zheng's face was severely distorted. After that, he suddenly pulled out a bright red talisman paper. This talisman paper looked as though it had been stained with blood and looked extremely demonic. The runes on it were also different from ordinary talisman papers. The moment this talisman paper was pulled out, even Mu Yu felt the formation runes around him suddenly stagnate. Mu Yu frowned slightly. The bright red talisman paper in Ling Zheng's hand gave him a sense of danger. He was shocked to discover that the formation runes that he had set up when he activated his array technique had been disrupted by this talisman paper. This was a very strange feeling. It was as if this talisman paper was the nemesis of his array technique. It actually caused his array technique to feel awkward. Let's see how you're going to use your array technique. Ling Zheng's face was filled with killing intent as he forced out a trace of his blood essence and fused it into the talisman paper. Immediately after, the spiritual energy in his hand surged. The talisman paper suddenly shattered and turned into countless bright red light spots. In an instant, Ling Zheng was in the middle of it and enveloped Mu Yu. What kind of talisman technique is this? Mu Yu finally sensed that something was amiss. The array technique around him had disappeared into thin air and could no longer be used. The shadow clone sword that had fused into the void also appeared with a crash and was held in Mu Yu's hand. Haha! This is my talisman faction's forbidden talisman. In this area, all array techniques are ineffective. Let's see how you can continue to be so complacent. Ling Zheng wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and slowly stood up. The Talisman Faction's forbidden talisman was made using the Talisman Stone as a prototype. It could make all spells ineffective, and the cost of making it was quite high. This kind of talisman technique could only be used when there was no other choice and confidence. This was because once it was used, it was equivalent to trapping both parties in this area. No one could leave and no one outside could enter. They could only leave after the forbidden talisman's spiritual energy was exhausted. Mu Yu sized up the red curtain around him and said indifferently, "I'm afraid that not only are all array techniques ineffective here, but even you can't use any talisman techniques, right?" The Talisman Faction used to have two treasures. One was the Array Hall, which was said to be able to control all array techniques and talisman techniques in the world. The other was the Talisman Stone, which made all array techniques and talisman techniques ineffective. It was the supreme treasure used to break array techniques and talisman techniques. This forbidden talisman was created by imitating the effect of the Talisman Stone. It could create a sealed space called the Forbidden Art Domain. Within 15 minutes, all array techniques and talisman techniques in the Forbidden Art Domain would be ineffective. That's right. You can't use array techniques and I can't use talisman technique. In this way, we can only compete to see whose cultivation is higher, isn't it? Ling Jing laughed coldly. Then, an aura of the ninth heaven of out-of-body realm wantonly pervaded the entire Forbidden Art Domain. If a formation master and a talisman master were prohibited from using formation techniques and talisman techniques, then if they wanted to compete, they could only rely on pure magic treasures and profound cultivation like ordinary cultivators to determine the winner. Ling Zheng had the cultivation of the ninth heaven of out-of-body realm. He was 100% sure that he would not lose in this competition. Once the forbidden talisman was used, Zhuge Xiaoxing's expression finally changed. He was a little angry. If Mu Yu was in danger just now, he could still help him. But now, in the Forbidden Art Domain, there was no way he could get close to him. Sect Master Zhuge, please don't be impatient. Life and death in an array talisman competition is up to fate. Right now, it's not something we can interfere with. Chang Tianqing chuckled. Although he was surprised that Mu Yu was in the out-of-body realm, Mu Yu's aura was definitely not as strong as Ling Zheng's. In the Forbidden Art Domain, Ling Zheng had full confidence that he could kill Mu Yu. Bastard! Zhuge Xiaoxing clenched his fists. His heart was in his mouth. He couldn't see the situation inside the Forbidden Art Domain. If Mu Yu was in danger, he wouldn't be able to save him in time. Everyone was blocked by the red curtain and couldn't see the situation inside. Naturally, they couldn't see the expression on Mu Yu's face. Are you planning to fight me without using array techniques and talisman techniques? Mu Yu revealed a playful smile. Chapter 468. In the cultivation world, there were a few types of cultivators that stood out from the rest. One type was the alchemist. They could refine heaven-defying pills, but their battle prowess was the lowest among cultivators of the same level. They were like bookworms who only knew how to refine pills and did not know how to fight. However, because they could refine pills, there were very few people who dared to go against them. The other two types were the Array Master and the Talisman Master. They were the exact opposite of the alchemist. Their battle prowess was the highest among cultivators of the same level. They could erupt with great power in a short period of time and kill their opponents in an instant. Although the Array Master and the Talisman Master were strong, their weakness was very obvious. They relied too much on the Array Master and the Talisman Master, so they could not fight a long battle. In fact, many people did not want to have conflicts with the Array Master and the Talisman Master. The battle between cultivators was often decided in a short period of time. In the process of fighting with the Array Master and the Talisman Master, You might not even be able to wait for their array master and the talisman master to exhaust their spiritual chi before being killed. The reason why the array master and the talisman master were powerful was because of their profound array master and the talisman master. If they were separated from the array master and the talisman master, they would be the same as the alchemist. They basically had no battle prowess because their battle prowess was completely linked to the array master and the talisman master. Ling Jing used the forbidden technique domain to trap himself and Mu Yu together. Both of them could no longer use the array master and the talisman master. This method was like cutting off one's own arms. They could only compete like ordinary cultivators to see whose spiritual energy was more robust and whose cultivation method was more profound. Ling Jing had the cultivation of the 9th heavenly layer of out-of-body stage, and Mu Yu's aura was clearly weaker than his. Therefore, Ling Jing had full confidence that he could kill Mu Yu by relying on his absolute advantage in cultivation. If it was another array master, perhaps Ling Jing could really kill his opponent by relying on his cultivation. However, he was too wrong. The forbidden technique domain allowed them to cut off their own arms. However, Mu Yu had 3 heads and 6 arms. Even if he cut off 2 arms, he still had 4 arms. If Ling Jing knew Mu Yu's true identity, he would not use this suicidal forbidden talisman even if he was beaten to death. Mu Yu had never been a simple person. When he was playing in the Danding sect, not only did he rely on the fusion of incomplete pills to suppress all the alchemy geniuses, he also firmly grasped victory in terms of combat strength. When he was learning Array Dao, he had outstanding talent in Array Dao, but this did not mean that he had lost his former battle prowess. Without using array techniques, he could still play with poison and use the most primitive sky sword 9 draws sword technique. In the 1 year that he had spent in the flowing water, his cultivation had already reached the 9th heavenly layer of leaving aperture realm. Right now, he was only suppressing his aura with the help of the Dustfall Sutra. There was no doubt that his fighting prowess was much stronger than the 9th heavenly layer of leaving aperture realm Ling Jing. Back then, when he had just stepped into the first layer of out-of-body realm, he had ruthlessly taught a lesson to the rhinoceros demon, who was at the 9th layer of out-of-body realm. On the other hand, even though Ling Jing was at the 9th heavenly layer of out-aperture realm, without his talisman technique, his battle prowess was probably even weaker than a first heavenly layer of out-aperture realm cultivator. Ling Jing had thought that as a disciple of the Array faction, Mu Yu would be like him, incapable of anything other than array technique. If there were 2 lone array master and talisman master in the field of forbidden techniques, it was true that the one with the higher cultivation would have the advantage. However, Ling Jing's mistake was that he shouldn't have looked at Mu Yu with his narrow vision. Heavens! Where does this guy get his confidence from? Little Shuai said in surprise. Maybe it's the Supreme Immortal Leaderboard that gave him his confidence. Mu Yu could not help but laugh. He really felt sorry for Ling Jing. This guy thought that he could be so arrogant because he was ranked 67th on the Supreme Immortal Leaderboard. However, the Supreme Immortal Leaderboard's initial ranking was actually evaluated by the Third Palace. The cultivation and strength of the Supreme Immortals on the Supreme Immortal Leaderboard were constantly changing. No one would stay in the same place. Many people who were not very strong might have a fortuitous encounter and obtained an extremely powerful Dharma treasure. Their overall strength would increase by another level. There was nothing to be proud of at the very beginning of the ranking. You're about to die. Why are you still laughing? Ling Jing did not like Mu Yu's smile. He clenched his fist. Why was he laughing so happily when he had lost his greatest trump card? Yes, you're about to die. Why can't you see the situation clearly? Mu Yu shook his head slightly. He looked at Ling Jing as if he was looking at a dead man. The people of the Talisman faction had always been arrogant and took things for granted. However, Ling Jing had shot himself in the foot in this matter. Then I'd like to see who's about to die. Ling Jing pulled out his sword fiercely. With a tap of his foot, he charged toward Mu Yu. He was at the 9th firmament of the out-of-aperture realm. He did not think that he would need to use too many sword moves to kill Mu Yu. He only needed to rely on his absolute strength and the suppression of his cultivation to kill Mu Yu. The forbidden talisman was extremely precious. It was actually a life-saving method. Of course, it was also very limited. It was only effective against array masters and talisman masters. This forbidden talisman was specially given to him by Chang Tianqing before he entered the arena. It was a final safeguard to ensure that he could kill the genius disciple of the array faction. Ling Jing's face revealed a trace of pleasure from killing. He could already imagine Mu Yu being pierced by his sword and then falling down unwillingly. His opponent's cultivation was not as profound as his. He would definitely die under his sword. So what if you've comprehended the sword array? You're still going to die in my hands. However, when he saw the smile on Mu Yu's face, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. Why is this bastard not panicking at all? Mu Yu raised his shadow clone sword. He did not need to use any profound swordsmanship. When it came to fighting with his opponent, his experience was much stronger than Ling Jing's. Ding! The shadow clone sword was like a clear spring, illuminating Ling Jing's eyes. He only saw a flash of green light. This was also the last sword light he saw. Then, he felt a pain in his throat and his breathing stopped. He wanted to say something in anger, but when he opened his mouth, only blood spurted out. He did not know when the sword in his hand had shattered. Why was this happening? Why was an array master whose cultivation was lower than his able to kill him? Ling Jing could not understand. However, he would never know the answer. Mu Yu's sword qi had already invaded his body, instantly destroying all the meridians in his body. Then, Mu Ling, who was hidden in the shadow clone sword, appeared. Ling Jing's soul was torn apart, and all his vitality was injected into Mu Ling's body. A small hole in Mu Ling's body was gradually healing. A one-hit kill. Bang! Ling Jing's eyes widened. He clutched his throat and fell to the ground. Perhaps if he did not use the forbidden talisman, he might not have died so quickly. At least, if Mu Yu wanted to kill him, he would definitely be obstructed by Chang Tianqing. However, he used the forbidden talisman, which meant that this battle was equivalent to suicide. A white light flashed in Ling Jing's hand. It was the symbol of an extreme immortal. When an extreme immortal was defeated or killed by a lower-ranked person, the extreme immortal symbol would be exchanged. However, this time, the white light had just leaped out. It flashed twice in the air, and then suddenly exploded, turning into array patterns and disappearing in front of Mu Yu's eyes. Mu Yu was a little surprised to see the extreme immortal symbol suddenly explode and disappear. She then looked around and immediately understood what had happened. The extreme immortal symbol was a superb array technique used by the array guardian of the third palace. However, no matter how powerful the array technique was, it was ineffective in this forbidden talisman domain. In the end, it was destroyed. That's a great help to me. Mu Yu nodded thoughtfully. He killed Ling Jing, so the extreme immortal symbol would be attached to him. Their rankings would be exchanged. This way, everyone would know Mu Yu's whereabouts. They would also know that the person who killed Ling Jing was Mu Yu. However, the extreme immortal symbol had been destroyed. This meant that the ranking on the extreme immortal leaderboard would not change for the time being. As long as the talisman sect did not spread the news, no one would know that the 67th extreme immortal had died. Moreover, he had died at the hands of the 80th extreme immortal. Mu Yu looked at the forbidden talisman domain around him. He could not leave. Right now, he could only wait for this forbidden talisman domain to disappear automatically after 15 minutes. The third palace seemed to be located in the land of the gods. All the palaces and buildings were glowing with an incomparably holy white light. Everything here was so solemn that no one would have any thoughts of blasphemy. A figure glowing with white light looked at the black and white array tablet. Suddenly, he exclaimed softly, "That's strange. Why is there another person who did not produce any soul power after death? This is the second time." The figure shrouded in the holy white light was very confused. He wanted to report this situation to the palace master, but then he remembered that the palace master seemed to have gone out to deal with something. "It's really strange. Should we go and investigate what's going on with these two people? Forget it, let's wait for the palace master to come back first." The figure pondered for a moment. The black and white stone tablets were still recording the lives and deaths of the people on the third palace. The people from the Talisman sect and the Talisman sect looked at the forbidden Talisman domain on the formation Marshall Field. No one could see what was happening inside from the outside. However, the two sides had different feelings. The people from the Talisman sect all had mocking expressions on their faces. In their opinion, the moment the forbidden Talisman domain was used, victory was already decided. The forbidden Talisman technique and formation technique could not be used in the forbidden Talisman technique. It depended on the person with the higher cultivation level to win. Ling Zheng's cultivation level was at the 9th heaven of the out-of-aperture realm. He completely suppressed Feng Mu. Zhuge Shaoxing was already clenching his fist. He was also aware of this. Although he still did not understand why Mu Yu was at the out-of-aperture realm, it was a fact that Mu Yu's cultivation level was not as high as Ling Zheng's. Once Mu Yu was unable to use the formation technique, he would definitely be killed by Ling Zheng. Sect leader Zhuge, why are you so anxious? Can't you have more confidence in your disciple? Chang Tianqing glanced at Zhuge Shaoxing and couldn't hide the smile on his face. Humph! Zhuge Shaoxing was already panicking. If Feng Mu was killed by Ling Zheng in the Forbidden Talisman domain, the Talisman sect would be doomed today. It was impossible for him to resist the attacks from the Talisman sect and the Star Gate at the same time by himself. Feng Mu was the key to activating the Formation Palace. Just as Zhuge Shaoxing was feeling vexed, a slight wave spread out from the center of the Forbidden Talisman domain, causing the entire Formation Marshall Field to tremble slightly. Then, the Forbidden Talisman domain gradually became blurry. The effect of the spell was over and the power of the spell began to dissipate. As the Forbidden Talisman domain gradually disappeared, everyone could vaguely see two figures inside. One was standing quietly while the other had already fallen to the ground, motionless. Zhuge Shaoxing stood up abruptly. His entire body was trembling as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. A deep sense of despair spread from the bottom of his heart. Is the Talisman sect really going to be finished just like that? Zhuge Shaoxing looked up to the sky and sighed. Not only him, but all the disciples of the Talisman sect also felt that the sky had suddenly turned dark. They did not know that the Talisman sect was about to be destroyed. They only knew that someone was about to win this year's talisman competition for them, but that person was still lying on the ground in the end. The red curtain had yet to fade and they still couldn't see who was standing inside. However, everyone had the same thought about who that person was. In their opinion, the person lying on the ground must be the Talisman sect's Feng Mu. Ha ha ha! Chang Tianqing laughed loudly and said arrogantly, Sect leader Zhuge, it seems like it's time for you to return the Formation Palace to us. Everyone from the Talisman sect revealed a victorious smile as they prepared to welcome their genius disciple, Ling Zheng, and enjoy the despair of the Talisman sect disciples. Chapter 469. Silence. The entire place was silent. Chang Tianqing's laughter came to an abrupt halt. The arrogant expression on his face froze. The air in his lungs seemed to have been sucked dry by something. It was also as if someone had ruthlessly struck his heart with a stick. His breathing actually skipped half a beat. The arrogant expressions of the remaining people from the Talisman sect suddenly turned into endless shock. Everyone's minds went blank as they looked at the lifeless Ling Jing lying on the ground. Shouldn't Feng Mu from the Array sect be the one to die? Why was Ling Jing the one lying on the ground? What's going on? Could it be that Ling Jing used an illusory talisman to trick the Array sect? Zhou Jinglin could not help but ask. Just like how Mu Chenghong had used a smokescreen to kill Mo Ziming, it had caused everyone to be confused about their identities and created a psychological gap between both sides. Zhou Jinglin had even thought that Ling Jing was also preparing to use an illusory talisman to ruthlessly humiliate the Array sect. Zhou Jinglin looked inquiringly at Chang Tianqing. However, Chang Tianqing's face was filled with resentment as he looked at Ling Jing, who was lying on the ground. His heart had already sunk. Chang Tianqing knew Ling Jing's situation very well. He had personally taught Ling Jing all of his talisman technique. To this arrogant genius from the Talisman sect, he disdained to learn any illusory techniques because he revered absolute power. He did not like things that were fake. Chang Tianqing knew that Ling Jing had never learned any illusory talismans. Zhuge Shaoxing, Master Lu, and the rest were also looking at Mu Yu. Their hearts were in a mess. They had the same thought as Zhou Jinglin. Even the other disciples of the Array sect did not dare to cheer because Mu Yu's illusory technique had deceived all of them. Feng Mu, did he really win? Master Lu turned to look at Zhuge Shaoxing in bewilderment. Zhuge Shaoxing was not confident and did not dare to jump to a conclusion so easily. Although the forbidden technique domain could prohibit all techniques, if an illusory talisman was used, it could still be successfully executed the moment the forbidden technique domain disappeared. The Array sect has won. Mu Yu looked at Chang Tianqing and smiled. Then, he exerted force with his feet and kicked Ling Jing's corpse towards Chang Tianqing as if he was kicking a broken sandbag. Chang Tianqing's eyes could already spit flames as he caught Ling Jing's corpse. The Array faction won? Mu Yu's words were like a ray of light in the darkness, awakening all the disciples of the Array faction from their deathly stillness. Everyone looked at Chang Tianqing's ashen expression and confirmed the authenticity of this news. Zhuge Xiaoxing's shriveled heart was suddenly filled with fresh and pleasant air, as if the sun had returned to him. A long-lost smile appeared on his aged face. The Array faction has won. We defeated the Talisman Grandmaster. Long live Feng Mu! Like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, cheers rang out from all directions like an avalanche. Yes, the Array faction had won. For the past 10 years, the Array faction had never won the Array Talisman competition. They had always been trampled underfoot by the Talisman faction. Their formation faction had always been unable to raise their heads in front of the Talisman faction. However, Feng Mu, who possessed extraordinary natural talent, had appeared this year. He was constantly creating miracles and performing unexpected actions time and time again. Moreover, he'd even directly killed the strongest genius disciple of the Talisman faction, the 67th Supreme Immortal, Ling Jing. It was as if a lifetime had passed. Everyone felt incredulous. The Talisman faction had suppressed the Array faction for so many years. When they went out and met the members of the Talisman faction, they felt embarrassed. Now, they could finally raise their heads in front of the members of the Talisman faction. Wait. Feng Mu has defeated Ling Jing. Doesn't that mean that the Array faction has a second Supreme Immortal? A disciple of the Array faction suddenly shouted. Everyone came to a realization. This year's Array Talisman competition had been rather bloody. However, the Talisman faction had paid an extremely painful price. They directly lost 2 Supreme Immortals, Mo Ziming and Ling Jing. This was a huge blow to the Talisman faction's future. Feng Mu! Feng Mu! Feng Mu! Feng Mu! Everyone shouted with all their might. They couldn't wait to rush over and throw Feng Mu into the air. Actually, it was impossible for the Talisman faction to lose today's array talisman competition. They'd sent Luo Feilong, Ji Wenkai, and a few other spies. They'd even sent Mu Chenghong, the person who'd hidden himself the most. As long as everything went according to plan, the Talisman faction would be able to make fun of the Array faction while ridiculing them. Then, they'd ruthlessly defeat the Array faction. However, they'd been too arrogant. They'd been so arrogant that they'd intentionally chosen to give up a round and let the Array faction win. In their opinion, even without this round, the Array faction wouldn't be able to turn the tables with Mu Chenghong around. However, they'd miscalculated. Mu Chenghong was a righteous person. He wasn't willing to see the faction that he'd painstakingly nurtured be destroyed. He'd grown up in the Array faction. Although he'd been sent by the Talisman faction, the Array techniques he'd learned had nothing to do with the Talisman faction. In the end, Mu Chenghong had chosen to betray the Talisman faction and become a true disciple of the Array faction. However, even when Mu Chenghong had betrayed them, the Talisman faction hadn't panicked. They still had their strongest Khanate disciple, who was the 67th Supreme Immortal, Ling Zheng. As long as they won the last round, this year's Array Talisman competition would still be in their hands. They'd thought that Ling Zheng would definitely beat the Array faction's Feng Mu to a pulp and destroy the Array faction's hope. However, they'd never expected that Feng Mu had been hiding his strength all this while. In the end, he'd even killed Ling Zheng. The Talisman faction had paid the price for their arrogance. It was a complete example of what it meant to suffer a double loss. Brat, how dare you kill Ling Zheng? Die. Chang Tiancheng was unable to restrain his anger. In a flash, a terrifying rune turned into a blood arrow and shot towards Mu Yu. However, Zhuge Shaoxing had long been on guard against him. In an instant, he appeared in front of Mu Yu. Runes surged and destroyed the blood arrow directly. Master Lu also rushed over and pulled Mu Yu away from the Array martial field. He was afraid that he'd be hurt. Feng Mu, you have to be careful. Follow me closely. Master Lu still looked uneasy. However, he was still full of smiles and protected Mu Yu firmly by his side. He didn't give the Talisman faction any chance to kill Mu Yu. The other Khanate Array masters of the Array faction also protected Mu Yu in the middle and glared at Chang Tiancheng. Chang Tiancheng, are you desperate now? Didn't you say that you'd give us the Array Talisman Stone if we lost the competition? Why are you going back on your word? Zhuge Shaoxing said coldly. All the Array faction disciples began to roar and scold the Talisman faction disciples in the field. Chang Tiancheng had actually attacked Mu Yu without caring about his image. This had already incurred the wrath of the crowd. Humph! Going back on my word? Even if I give you the Array Talisman Stone, can you afford it? Chang Tiancheng was furious. Mo Ziming's death hadn't made him this angry. However, Ling Zheng was different. He had completely nurtured Ling Zheng as the next sect master. Most of the Talisman faction's resources had also been poured into Ling Zheng. However, such a future star of the Talisman faction had died in the hands of the Array faction disciples today. This almost made him lose his mind. That depends on whether you're a man or not and whether you dare to keep your promise. Zhuge Shaoxing's clothes fluttered even though there was no wind. A rich and majestic aura spread from his body. The white runes around his body began to surge. His aura wasn't any weaker than Chang Tiancheng's. Chang Tiancheng's face was very gloomy. Then, he laughed out of anger. Zhuge Shaoxing, I'm afraid you don't know that your Array faction has already reached the point of annihilation today, right? Even if I give you the Array Talisman Stone, you'll still obediently kneel at my feet and give it back to me. Chang Tiancheng took out the Array Talisman Stone. He formed a seal with his hand and injected it into the Array Talisman Stone. Then, the array talisman stone suddenly shot out a ray of light that made the hearts of all the array faction disciples palpitate. This ray of light shot into the sky and exploded in the sky above the array martial field. The array martial field's array boundary couldn't withstand the might of the array talisman stone at all. It was directly shattered by the might of the array talisman stone. Then, the ground of the array martial field began to slowly crack open. Gravel began to fall into the mountain stream. The array talisman stone was the nemesis of all spells. It could break all array techniques and talisman techniques in the world. Zhuge Shaoxing had already flown back from the array martial field. His expression didn't change at all. The talisman faction wanted to plot against the array faction's foundation. He had already prepared a countermeasure. Zhuge Shaoxing said sternly, "Chang Tianqing, if you want to annihilate my array faction, we'll have to see if you have the ability to do so." Chang Tianqing's face was already distorted. The array talisman stone in his hand shone again. A pitch-black ray of light shot out and turned into a bone-chilling kill word in the sky above the array faction. The kill word was like the announcement of the god of death. The illusion array above the array faction instantly cracked like porcelain. Fragments of the array pattern kept falling and dissipating. Then, a gloomy and cold aura spread outside the array faction. The kill word on the array talisman stone was the signal to annihilate the array faction. It was like a mountain had collapsed outside the array faction. Deafening explosions resounded, and the sounds of battle resounded from afar. Zhuge Shaoxing, your entire array faction has been surrounded by my people. You can either kneel down and beg for mercy today and hand over the array hall, or I'll kill all the disciples of your array faction and seize the array hall myself. Make your choice. Chang Tianqing spoke fiercely. Your people? You really dare to boast shamelessly? If you don't have the help of Stargate, do you think your talisman faction can overthrow us? Dream on. Even if our array faction has declined, we won't wag our tail and beg for mercy from Stargate. You've degraded yourself and become their lackey. How lamentable! Zhuge Shaoxing spoke. Chang Tianqing roared with laughter and said, I'm just going with the flow. Not to mention that we're just using each other with Stargate. Once I take back the array hall and strengthen the talisman faction to its former glory, my talisman faction will change its name to the talisman faction. This had always been Chang Tianqing's ambition. He wanted to attack the array faction, subdue the array hall, and seize all the resources of the array faction before using them in his talisman faction. So long as the array hall was in his hands, the talisman faction would definitely become the talisman faction. In the past, the talisman faction was able to look down upon the entire third layer of the continent and sit on equal footing with the 8 factions because it possessed the array talisman stone and the array hall. It was even able to firmly suppress the 8 factions. If it wasn't for the internal conflict that led to the separation of the talisman faction and the separation of the array talisman stone and the array hall, the third layer of the continent would have 9 factions instead of 8. Humph. I'm afraid you won't be lucky enough to become the faction master. Do you really think that you can become someone on equal footing with the Stargate's faction master just because you're relying on Stargate? You're too naive. Even if you seize the array hall, you'll only be a puppet of Stargate. Zhuge Shaoxing sneered. You don't have to worry about that. Once I kill you and obtain the array hall, everything will naturally become clear. Chang Tianqing scanned the 8 mountains around the array martial field. At this moment, the 8 mountains were filled with disciples of the array faction who were at a loss. They didn't understand what was going on. Let the massacre of your array faction begin with these disciples. Chang Tianqing fiercely raised the array talisman stone in his hand. Then, the array talisman stone once again emitted 8 destructive black lights that shot towards the 8 mountains. These 8 black lights were extremely domineering and had extremely terrifying destructive power. This was because it couldn't be blocked by any array or talisman technique. No matter how powerful Zhuge Shaoxing was, he was still an array master. There was no way he could block the attack of the array talisman stone. However, Zhuge Shaoxing didn't panic at all. It was as if he didn't care about the lives of the array faction disciples on the 8 mountains. Chapter 470. Boom! The black light collided with the 8 mountains surrounding the array martial field. The sharp killing intent spread in all directions and instantly destroyed the 8 mountains. But what surprised Chang Tiancheng once again was that although the 8 mountains were destroyed, none of the disciples of the array faction let out a scream. All the disciples of the array faction disappeared in an instant. The only thing left on the mountain was the huge boulders that were sent flying and the trees that were cut in half. The disciples of the array faction, who were originally cheering on the mountain, seemed to have been prepared for this and mysteriously disappeared. They just disappeared into thin air without any warning. Chang Tiancheng looked at the array patterns that were torn apart by the rune stones on the 8 mountains. His face turned gloomy again. Array technique projection? Zhuge Shaoxing stared at Chang Tiancheng and said, "Do you really think that your plan is flawless? Do you really think that we don't know that Luo Feilong, Ji Wenkai and the rest are spies?" This was Mu Yu's idea. He had already used the soul array to control all the spies. Other than the spies that couldn't be controlled, the rest of the spies were completely unaware of this matter. And just yesterday, all the disciples of the array faction received Zhuge Shaoxing's orders and secretly sneaked into the array hall. The disciples of the array faction who were watching the array martial field were all illusions created by array technique. They were also projections. This array technique was called the Mirage Array Technique. It could project the images of all the disciples in the array hall onto the mountains surrounding the array martial field. The reactions of the disciples of the array faction to the situation on the array martial field were all real. They were indeed watching this array talisman competition. However, they were all watching from the array hall. The reason why the array hall was so powerful was that it could control all the array techniques and talisman techniques in the world. It could also set up any array techniques and talisman technique. This included a rather brilliant spatial array. It was similar to the simplest heaven and earth sleeve array that every cultivator could set up. However, the heaven and earth sleeve array couldn't hide living things. However, the spatial array of the array hall could allow thousands of people to enter and live for a month without a problem. This matter was done very secretly. The people of the Talisman faction placed their attention on the 19 Khanate array masters of the array faction. Who would care if the disciples of the array faction on the 8 mountains were real or fake? Didn't you get this news from Lu Dai? Chang Tiancheng asked Zhou Jinglin in a low voice. Zhou Jinglin shook his head and said, "Lu Dai only told me that the array faction had prepared some counterattack plans. This array technique projection is not important, so he didn't tell me." Chang Tiancheng turned his gaze back to Zhuge Shaoxing and said, "Very good. But even so, you can't avoid the destruction of your array faction." As he spoke, countless powerful figures shot over from afar and landed beside Chang Tiancheng. Each of these people was at least at the out-of-body stage, and more than 40 of them were actually severed spirit innate talisman masters. The members of the talisman sect had all been mobilized for this battle. The number of congenital talisman masters in the talisman sect had always been greater than the formation sect. After all of them made an appearance, the imposing aura they revealed was ferocious and overbearing, and it caused the 19 congenital formation masters of the formation sect to feel their mouths go dry. If they really wanted to fight force with force, it would be very difficult for the array faction to withstand the attacks of over 40 Khanate talisman techniques from the talisman grandmaster. If it wasn't for the fact that the talisman sect feared the existence of the array hall and the array heavenly Tao, they would have made their move many years ago instead of waiting until now. The people of the Talisman sect only found out from Stargate a few months ago that the Array Heavenly Tao was no longer a threat to them. Although they didn't know how the Stargate found out, after repeated investigations by the spies of the Array faction, they finally found some abnormalities in the Array Heavenly Tao. Thus, they believed the Stargate's suggestion and prepared to attack the Array faction. The Array Hall was the foundation of the Array faction. Once the Array Hall was fully activated, the Talisman sect wouldn't be able to take down the Array faction even if they used the entire sect's strength. They might even have to pay a terrible price. Thus, they had no choice but to control Master Lu to attack the Array Hall from the inside. Kill them! Chang Tiancheng roared angrily. All the congenital Talisman masters behind him began to attack the Array faction's formation masters. Countless talisman techniques overflowed and fell from the sky. Not to be outdone, the Array faction's formation masters also launched their own array techniques to meet the attack. The collision of array techniques and talisman techniques caused fierce sparks to fly in the air. Every single one of them used the techniques they were most adept at. None of them showed any mercy. Powerful array patterns and talisman patterns intertwined in the air, causing the air in the entire array martial field to become scorching hot. Violent spiritual energy surged in all directions, instantly destroying the 8 towering mountains on the side of the array martial field. More than 40 congenital talisman masters against 19 congenital array masters. The Array faction was at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. Almost every congenital array master had to deal with 2 congenital talisman masters. At this time, 2 severed soul stage congenital talisman masters directly charged at Muyu. To them, Muyu had to die. Muyu looked at the 2 aggressive severed soul stage congenital talisman masters and felt a little apprehensive. He was only at the 9th heavenly layer of out-of-body stage, so it would be difficult for him to resist these 2 congenital talisman masters. 2 gray talisman pattern hands came at Muyu from all directions. The array patterns under Muyu's feet flashed, and he disappeared and teleported far away. However, the severed soul stage congenital talisman masters were not slower than him. In the blink of an eye, 2 big hands appeared above Muyu's head again. Zedui spiritual reverse space. Blue array patterns suddenly wrapped Muyu and pulled him back, breaking away from the 2 big hands transformed by talisman patterns. Master Lu's figure stood in front of Muyu. The 8 trigrams array suddenly flashed out under Master Lu's feet. Suddenly, a brilliant light rose from the ground and shrouded the 2 congenital talisman masters. Zedui spiritual reversal space was a very powerful Xiantian formation technique of Master Lu. It could make people trapped by his formation unable to feel the flow of spiritual energy around them, and even suppress the flow of spiritual energy in the other party's body. Last night, Situ Yangtian was subdued by Master Lu's array technique due to his carelessness. Without help, this powerful array technique could only trap the 2 congenital talisman masters and could not hurt them. If Master Lu wanted to maintain this array technique, it would be easy for other congenital talisman masters to sneak attack him. Thunder Snake Swift Shadow. Blue rays of light shot out from Muyu's hands, and the violent thunder and lightning transformed into a series of snake-shaped afterimages. It shot out and instantly rushed into Master Lu's spirit extinguishing array, and rushed towards the 2 Xiantian talisman masters. The 2 congenital talisman masters were suppressed by Master Lu's array technique and could not resist at all. In an instant, they were hit by Muyu's countless thunder snakes. The violent power of thunder and lightning acted on their bodies. The 2 congenital talisman masters' bodies were covered with terrifying thunder and lightning. In the blink of an eye, they were charred black. However, the 2 of them were severed soul stage cultivators after all. Muyu's lethality was not enough to kill them. It only made them dizzy for a moment. But just this moment was enough to take their lives. As the shadow-splitting sword flashed with a blue light, The heads and bodies of the two Xiantian talisman masters were immediately separated from their bodies. With their eyes wide open, they unwillingly let out a final roar, and then their heads and bodies fell down the mountain stream. In the blink of an eye, the two congenital talisman masters had died. Mu Yu's Mu Ling sword seemed to have something more substantial, but he did not care because killing people from the talisman grandmaster would not make him feel guilty. Good job! Master Lu praised Mu Yu with a smile. Master Lu, I feel that the two of us are invincible together. Mu Yu smiled. He still trusted Master Lu so much. I'm so touched. Zhou Jinglin's gloomy figure appeared in front of Master Lu and Mu Yu. Master Lu's face showed an angry look. The last time he was almost killed by Zhou Jinglin in the Yin Corpse formation was still vivid in his mind. He did not look into Zhou Jinglin's eyes. Instead, he whispered to Mu Yu, Feng Mu, quickly take Mu Chenghong, Song Qingyu and the others away from here. I will settle this account with Zhou Jinglin personally. Mu Yu hesitated for a moment and glanced coldly at Zhou Jinglin. The formation under his feet surged and the Big Dipper constellation formation took him away from here and went towards Mu Chenghong and the others. Mu Chenghong and Song Qingyu were both seriously injured. Now only Cheng Zhuo was taking care of them. Cheng Zhuo took them both into a ruin and did not dare to show his face. The terrifying fluctuations caused by the fight between the congenital talisman master and the congenital array master in the air were not something that Cheng Zhuo could bear. Master Lu was full of anger and finally looked at Zhou Jinglin. His hand lit up with blue thunder and lightning formation, and the hissing of thunder snakes echoed in the surroundings. Zhou Jinglin, it's time for us to settle this. Do you want to settle this with me? Zhou Jinglin's eyes flashed with a strange light, but the corner of his mouth showed a strange smile. Master Lu's heart skipped a beat. The feeling of uneasiness was getting stronger and stronger. Zhuge Shaosheng and Chang Tiancheng were fighting fiercely. They were the leaders of the Array faction and the Talisman faction, respectively. They represented the strongest strength of the two factions and were also the pinnacle of Talisman technique and Array technique. Their spells had already reached a level of perfection, and it was almost impossible for anyone to interfere with their battle. The talisman patterns covered Chang Tiancheng, and the talisman papers in the sky were faintly discernible, flashing with a strange red light. The surrounding area seemed to be plated with a layer of red clothes, which was enchanting and frightening. All the talisman papers began to ripple in front of them, and the ripples gradually rotated into a vortex. Then, a breathtaking aura suddenly came from the vortex. Then, more than 100 terrifying demonic beasts rushed out of the vortex and kept crying in the air. These demonic beasts were all living demonic beasts. The lowest cultivation level was rank 5, which was equivalent to the strength of out-of-body stage. Most of them were rank 6 demonic beasts, who were forcibly sealed in the talisman papers by Chang Tiancheng's powerful talisman technique. Now that they were suddenly unsealed and joined the battle, their tyrannical aura was enough to sweep everything away. After the demonic beasts were unsealed, they saw the Array masters of the Array faction. Like tigers and wolves seeing cattle, they rushed toward all the Array masters with red formation patterns floating all over their bodies. However, they couldn't interfere with the other Array masters because a white formation net formed a square cage, trapping Chang Tiancheng and his demonic beasts inside. White formation patterns appeared in Zhuge Xiaosheng's hands, and the formation net also enveloped him inside. The majestic aura suppressed all the demonic beasts. Chang Tiancheng blasted out a palm, and countless palm prints of various sizes were imprinted on the white formation net. However, every engraved line of the formation net was agilely rippled, and all of Chang Tiancheng's talisman pattern palm prints were dissolved. Chang Tiancheng's talisman technique couldn't break Zhuge Xiaosheng's Array technique. Chang Tiancheng stopped attacking the formation net and looked coldly at Zhuge Xiaosheng. He smiled viciously and said, a trapped beast fighting. Since you can't wait to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Zhuge Shaoxing stepped on the white 8 trigrams array pattern. He looked like a god descending to the mortal world, mighty and dignified. As the sect master of the array faction, Zhuge Shaoxing's understanding of array Dao was second only to array heavenly Dao in the cultivation world. He even surpassed Deadwood, Evergreen, and Ciebulo. Although Deadwood, Evergreen, and Ciebulo were skilled in array Dao, they usually kept a low profile. However, as the sect master of the array faction, Zhuge Shaoxing couldn't keep a low profile. Naturally, he didn't need to keep a low profile because his array Dao had already reached the pinnacle. Chang Tianqing, I'll make you pay today. Zhuge Shaoxing was filled with murderous intent. He knew that Chang Tianqing had the talisman stone that could break all spells. However, the talisman stone was the same as the array palace. It was a treasure that only extremely talented people could truly control. Chang Tianqing's attainments in array Dao couldn't compare to Zhuge Shaoxing's, and it was impossible for him to completely control the talisman stone. Chapter 471. Pay the price? Let's see if you have the ability to do so. Chang Tianqing's hand formed several runes, which quickly spread in the air like a plague and instantly entered the bodies of the demonic beast. Every demonic beast seemed to have been injected with some kind of strengthening agent. All of them roared and brazenly pounced on Zhuge Shaoxing. More than 100 demonic beasts were glowing with red light. Sharp claws, flames, venom, and all kinds of barbaric and terrifying methods attacked Zhuge Shaoxing. However, Zhuge Shaoxing did not panic at all. He was a body fusion stage cultivator and was not afraid of these demonic beasts at all. The white formation net emitted a dazzling white light. Suddenly, white tentacle-like formation runes extended from the formation net and agilely intertwined in the air, wrapping around all the demonic beasts. The powerful formation runes burst out with turbulent spiritual energy, sending the demonic beasts flying. However, many nimble demonic beasts dodged these tentacles. Among them, a sword-tailed tiger had already waved its steel-like tail and swept it towards Zhuge Shaoxing. The formation runes on Zhuge Shaoxing's hand flashed. Soon, several formation runes intertwined in front of his eyes. The sword-tailed tiger could not dodge in time and directly crashed into the formation runes. The white formation runes were like sharp blades, cutting the sword-tailed tiger into several pieces in an instant. Gone Li Holy Seal of Nothingness. The white 8 trigrams formation runes under Zhuge Shaoxing's feet began to rotate. 2 majestic formation runes suddenly gushed out from the Qian and Li positions of the 8 trigrams. Like 2 nimble dragons, they coiled around Zhuge Shaoxing's hands. Then, his hands formed a complicated hand seal. The 2 formation runes formed an 8 trigrams imprint in front of his chest. The 8 trigrams imprint suddenly trembled, as if it was a song from ancient times. The formation runes spread out with Zhuge Shaoxing as the center, causing all the demonic beast's eyes to be dazed for a moment. At this moment, the 8 trigrams imprint in Zhuge Shaoxing's hand had already left his hand. It split into thousands of illusions of the 8 trigrams and spread out in all directions. Every 8 trigrams imprint was incomparably solemn and solemn. With an indomitable aura, it instantly swept past the demonic beasts. The demonic beasts that came into contact with the 8 trigrams did not even have time to react before they were turned into nothingness. Not a single piece of flesh was left behind. They were completely annihilated. A 10-meter-tall demonic beast was struck in the chest by the 8 trigrams imprint. A huge hole appeared in its chest, and blood could not even spurt out. His entire body was invaded by the powerful formation runes, and rays of white light shot out from his body. Then, as if a white flame had ignited, his entire body was burned to ashes. Zhuge Shaoxing annihilated more than 100 powerful demonic beasts with just a single array technique. Not even a speck of dust was left behind. The lethality of this formation was quite terrifying. It was also an extremely profound innate formation art. In the hands of Zhuge Shaoxing, it was as if God had helped it, turning Chang Tianqing's talisman art into nothing in an instant. The 8 trigrams imprint did not disappear. Instead, it continued to surge towards Chang Tianqing. Chang Tianqing's face revealed a look of deep fear. He didn't dare to take this array technique head-on. He quickly retreated to the edge of the array net, but there was no way to retreat. Mystic talisman shatters the mountains and devours the heavens. Chang Tianqing raised a yellow talisman paper in his hand. The talisman shadows moved, and the talisman paper grew from small to 30 feet tall. Then, the talisman paper shattered, forming a dark red vortex. Black runes flashed across the vortex from time to time. It was vast and deep, like a bloody mouth that could swallow a mountain, sucking in all the 8 trigrams imprint. The dark red vortex swallowed all the 8 trigrams imprint. The runes and formation runes collided violently in the vortex. The white formation runes instantly covered all the dark red runes. The vortex was mixed with white light, and the speed of its rotation became slower and slower. Finally, it stopped moving. Then, countless formation runes suddenly burst out from the vortex. Bang! A terrifying explosion sounded, and Chang Tianqing was ruthlessly slammed into the array net. Another powerful formation rune surged out from the array net, and Chang Tianqing was sent flying. Countless runes appeared on his body, and from time to time, they resisted the formation runes from the array net. Only then did he neutralize the terrifying lethality of the array net and stabilize his body in time. At this moment, Chang Tianqing's clothes were in a mess, and a trace of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Zhuge Shaoxing, I have really underestimated you. Chang Tianqing wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He didn't expect Zhuge Shaoxing's array skills to be so powerful. You are too ambitious and arrogant. Do you really think that my array faction is so easy to chew? Zhuge Shaoxing said in a deep voice. He had thought about it. As long as he killed Chang Tianqing, while he was still unable to activate the talisman stone, then today's crisis would naturally be resolved. The battle between array masters and talisman masters was usually decided in a short period of time. The victor and loser could be determined with a single exchange. Zhuge Shaoxing's array skills were the strongest apart from the 6 array masters. His talent and strength were much more powerful than Chang Tianqing's. However, Chang Tianqing suddenly revealed a sly smile. Do you really think that's all I have? Zhuge Shaoxing frowned. Then, he seemed to have noticed something. His gaze suddenly changed as he said in shock, How can it be? You impossible! Why is it impossible? Dark red runes began to appear in Chang Tianqing's eyes. At this moment, the array net that trapped the 2 of them also began to become restless and unstable. Mu Yu left the battlefield and found Qingzhuo in the ruins. Qingzhuo was protecting Mu Yu and Song Qingyu alone. He was panicking. When he saw Mu Yu, he heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, his eyes were filled with respect. Obviously, Mu Yu had won the respect of all the disciples of the array faction by defeating Ling Jing, who was ranked 67th on the Supreme Immortal list. Qingzhuo, thank you for your hard work. Alright, where is Yi Hong? Mu Yu didn't see Yi Hong. Although Yi Hong admitted defeat in the array talisman competition, he was still a disciple of the array faction and not a spy. Moreover, under the circumstances, Yi Hong's array skills were already known by the people of the talisman faction. He would definitely lose if he went up. Mu Yu didn't blame him. Qingzhuo shook his head. He was only responsible for protecting the injured Mu Chenghong and Song Qingyu. He didn't care where Yi Hong went during the chaos. Are you looking for this coward? There's no need to look for him. I've already taken care of the spineless people for you. A cold voice sounded from behind Mu Yu. Then, 3 corpses fell in front of Mu Yu. They were Sun Yingdao, Luo Feilong, and Yi Hong. Jiang Xiangdi's face was extremely cold and filled with endless hatred. She couldn't accept the deaths of Mo Ziming and Ling Jing. She had specially come to seek revenge on Mu Yu. Mu Yu was also furious. It was fine that Sun Yingda and Luo Feilong were killed by Jiang Xiangdi. If the Talisman faction wanted to get rid of his spy, they could do so. However, Yi Hong was a true disciple of the Array faction. Even if he fled at the last minute, he didn't look down on Yi Hong. This was because the Array Talisman competition was a game of the Talisman faction. Yi Hong couldn't win at all. Spineless people didn't deserve death. However, they were killed by Jiang Xiangdi. Jiang Xiangdi was truly a vicious woman. Even Ling Jing died in my hands. Do you think you can kill me? A black and white light flashed across Mu Yu's eyes. A faint, killing intent gradually emerged from his body. Jiang Xiangdi's face suddenly twisted. You killed my senior brother. I won't let you off. Mu Yu didn't know about the relationship between Jiang Xiangdi and Ling Jing. He didn't want to know either. Even if they were childhood sweethearts, they should have been mentally prepared from the moment they looked down on the Array faction and wanted to kill everyone in the Array faction. Do you need me to fulfill your wish and send you to see him? Mu Yu couldn't bear to see the terrified expression on Yi Hong's face. It was obvious that Yi Hong had been scared out of his wits by Jiang Xiangdi before he died. Mu Yu raised his head and looked at Jiang Xiangdi. However, Jiang Xiangdi had already charged towards him. The red talisman paper spread out around Jiang Xiangdi, and the powerful talisman technique instantly bombarded Mu Yu's head and face. However, in Mu Yu's eyes, Jiang Xiangdi's talisman technique was much worse than Ling Jing's. Her cultivation was also inferior to Ling Jing's. Mu Yu could easily kill her. However, Jiang Xiangdi's talisman technique suddenly turned in the air and turned towards the 3 people. At this time, an even stronger aura fell on Mu Yu. A Xiantian talisman master at the spirit severing stage. Mu Yu was shocked. He was firmly locked by the aura of a Xiantian talisman master at the spirit severing stage. There was no way he could stop Jiang Xiangdi. Jiang Xiangdi was an out-of-body talisman master, while Chengzhua was only at the nascent soul stage. Not to mention that he had to protect 2 unconscious people. He couldn't withstand Jiang Xiangdi's attack at all. Chengzhua gritted his teeth. Formation patterns appeared around his body. Even though he knew that he was no match for Jiang Xiangdi, he didn't want to abandon Mu Chenghong and Song Qingyu and escape alone. Little handsome, Mu Yu shouted anxiously. At the same time, the wind heart linking formation under his feet had already surged out. Got it. Little Handsome's mysterious thunder fall. Little Handsome shouted in its childish voice. Its entire little body had already leaped into the wind heart linking formation. One of its little hands was placed on its waist, while the other one was pointing straight at the sky. A gigantic blue thunder sword, with its little hand as the sword hilt, soared into the sky. The tyrannical lightning transformed into sword energy that filled the sky, slashing down towards Jiang Xiangdi. Jiang Xiangdi was shocked. The power of the terrifying sword qi was far beyond her imagination. If her talisman technique was used on Chengzhua and the others, she would definitely be hit by Little Handsome's overbearing thunder sword. In a hurry, she could only give up her talisman technique and dodge. Little Handsome's thunder sword happened to destroy all her talisman techniques. Little Handsome stepped on the wind heart linking formation and held a heavenly sword that was dozens of times taller than him. All the hair on his body stood up. He looked at Jiang Xiangdi and then said, as if he was talking to himself, "The 2 peaks in front of your chest are so small. Sister Qiao Shui and Sister Tian Ran are like watermelons. You're just a small fishball. You're definitely not soft enough." This guy usually relied on his cute appearance to play the role of a girl killer. Every girl wanted to hug him, and when Little Handsome saw girls, he liked to shamelessly drill into their soft places. However, it was obvious that Jiang Xiangdi didn't like Little Handsome, because her face was so pale that water could be wrung out. Mu Yu didn't stay idle. There was a formation pattern in his wind heart linking formation that was connected to his body. He had teleported out and dodged the fatal blow of the spirit-severing stage congenital talisman master. Then, a middle-aged man appeared in front of Mu Yu. Qi Kaming, a spirit-severing stage congenital talisman master. 19 congenital array masters against 42 congenital talisman masters. The congenital array masters were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. Fortunately, this was the formation faction. There were protective formations set up by the congenital array masters everywhere. They could be controlled freely. The congenital array masters had the geographical advantage. Otherwise, it would be impossible to block the attack of so many congenital talisman masters. However, because Chang Tiancheng had destroyed part of the protective formation with the help of the formation runestone, the 19 congenital array masters couldn't completely block all the talisman masters. Qi Kaming came with Jiang Xiangdi. Their mission was to kill Mu Yu. Kid, it's time for you to pay the price for killing someone from my talisman sect. Qi Kaming's face was very gloomy. Although Mu Yu killed Ling Zheng was an out-of-body stage congenital disciple after all. He was a spirit-severing stage congenital talisman master. Whether it was talisman techniques or fighting experience, he was far superior to Ling Zheng. In his opinion, no matter how powerful Mu Yu was, it was impossible for him to have the ability to fight with a congenital talisman master. Mu Yu calmly looked at Qi Kaming, who was in the spirit-severing stage. If Qi Kaming was an ordinary cultivator in the first sky of the spirit-severing stage, he might want to fight, but the problem was that he was facing an innate talisman master. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.